a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo.
Welcome to the CoCo Crew Podcast. A delicious adventure into the world of retro computing news and information. Featuring the Tandy Color Computer.
Hey, you got your CoCo 3 yet?
CoCo.
All right. Welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. You have joined us for the February 2018 edition of the CoCo Crew Podcast. This is officially episode number 33. Very exciting. We are back to have an in-depth discussion of the merits of programming in C versus BASIC. Well, maybe not. Well, as usual, this is John Linville speaking, vamping for the microphone. And I am joined by my co-host, Neil Blanchard. Are you there, Neil? Hello.
I am here. Hello, everyone.
Mike Rowan. How you doing, Myro?
Hi, everybody. I'm doing well.
Good. And, of course, slightly under the weather, but Trooper joining us anyway, Mr. Boise Pete. How are you doing, Boise?
Well, I'm not so much under the weather as I was. I'm probably about 98% back to normal.
That's very good. Exciting time of year down there where Mr. Boise lives, I'm sure we all know. But very good to have you. We're back to talk about our favorite computer, the color computer. Time marches on. As we said, it's now February. Tandy Assembly is roughly 8 months away. CoCo Fest, of course, is only 2 months away. You guys excited for CoCo Fest?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely.
Very exciting, very rejuvenating to get to that time of year, our CoCo New Year, as we sometimes say. So everyone's got projects in plan or in progress. Neil, what are you working on?
Yeah, I got quite a few projects going here. I want to try to get them done.
Yeah, maybe too many.
Yeah, working on some cartridges and some more joypad adapters and possibly even a digitizer cable.
Uh-oh.
Audio digitizer.
Wow.
Cool.
That's cool. Well, what is that, the program that runs with?
There's a few programs you can use, actually. Soundtracks is probably the biggest one on the CoCo 3.
Okay.
But there's a few other ones on the CoCo 2 as well.
And that plugs into the joystick port?
No, I believe that plugs into the cassette port.
Cassette port, yeah. Max Sound probably can use that too.
Yeah, that's the one I'm targeting. So
awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, how about you, Mike? What are you up to these days?
Oh, right now I'm working on part 3 of the Game Master cart videos. So
Awesome.
that may be out by the time this episode is released.
Cool. Anything for CoCo Fest?
I'm working on something, but I'm not ready to reveal it.
All right. Something up your sleeve.
Yeah.
Exciting.
How about you, Boise? Anything brewing for CoCo Fest?
Yeah, still working on the CMOC OS 9 support with Pierre, making some progress there. Hopefully that'll be, I would say, pretty close to fully completed at CoCo Fest. Also, still wanting to get people to contribute to the CoCo call for papers.
Cool.
That's something I'd love to see get more contribution on. And I'm also working on a potential project for CoCo Fest. I will not divulge anything about it other than the code name, which is Methuselah.
Methuselah. As an old as Methuselah. Very cool. All right. Well, for myself, I'm working a few projects. I'm touching up the version of Farfall that's enhanced to use the Game Master cartridge hardware. Also looking at maybe adding an extra feature there. Always this or that. Another thing coming up. Always something. Always have to keep an eye out on the next tech segment and that sort of thing. So we'll talk a little bit about what I've been up to a little bit later in the podcast. Well, other than that, who's got some new acquisitions? Anybody picked up anything off eBay or otherwise recently? Anything cool you want to talk about?
Well, I don't have anything that I picked up off of eBay, but I did put something on eBay today that's CoCo related.
Oh, yeah? Tell us about it.
Well, this is something that I've had in my possession for a couple of years. I decided to finally get it out there. It's the Farfall edition of the TRS-80 Color Computer 2. It's a CoCo 2 that I painted a couple of years ago in the primary Farfall colors. It comes with a Farfall cartridge, and I'm even going to throw in a joystick.
Hey.
Cool. It looks pretty nice. Very exciting.
Will it be signed?
It could be, but I would imagine it would have to be signed by John for any real legitimacy. So,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Certificate of authentication. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, maybe actually, John can't ship you a CoCo, but maybe we could get you to do that certificate of authentication signing. So.
I have seen the actual physical device, so I would feel okay signing that. So
It's like those New York Times asset tags, man.
I wish we had some of those.
Yeah.
Or perhaps the winning bidder could take it down to CoCo Fest, get it signed in person.
There you go. It's all possible.
That would be a possibility, and I will sign my own name. So and I always have a little stream of things coming in from the eBay. We actually put a little Valentine's Day chocolate in the mailbox for our mail carrier. That's how much we value him around here. But I did little things. I did pick up a sleeve of op amps that could be used for upgrading CoCo 1 serial ports so that they can run at a faster speed for running drive wire. Not too exciting there, but something.
Very nice. By the way, just real quick, which ones did you get? Because there are a few that work on that.
Okay, I got the TLO81, TL081, which I found a post saying that worked. I have not actually tried it yet, so I'm hoping that it works.
Cool.
They're about 30 cents a piece, so if nothing else, I'll have to build amplifiers with them. I did find kind of an interesting thing, a little bit of a unicorn. Not something anybody's really looking for, I think, but a little piece of software that showed up on eBay. It is called Child Pace, rather, no S. And I had no idea what it was. It says Child Development Program, ages 3 to 60 months, from Computer Rose. Never heard of them. Haven't run the program yet, but I did flip through the manual. And what it looks like is a set of exercises to show your kids something on the computer and have them kind of try to do the exercise. And it's something like draw these triangles or whatever. And then it shows you diagrams that are like example diagrams of, well, if your kid tries to draw these triangles and it looks like this, that's okay. But if your triangles look like that, well, maybe you need to have your kid checked out.
Interesting.
And so I am interested. I need to take time to go through that just for maybe the humor of it. Maybe it's something I can eventually use to evaluate the pace of my grandchildren should I be blessed with some in the future. My own kids are a bit too old for this one. I think they can all manage to draw circles and triangles and that sort of thing. It did come with some snazzy looking red yarn and some wooden blocks. I don't know what those are for. I didn't get to that in the manual. But anyway, it's just one of those. I think I probably would put it on the shelf next to that book about running spreadsheets on the color computer. And it's like, I'm not sure what the snapshot in time is where this was appropriate. I somehow blinked and missed it, but kind of cool that it exists at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very cool. That's definitely a unicorn. I'd like
Yeah.
to see a photo of that. That's really interesting.
Exactly. Maybe I should bring it to CoCo Fest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Traveling museum.
But anyway, anyone else have some interesting or curious finds from eBay this month? I did buy an arcade board for Super Pac-Man which has 6809 processors on it, one for the regular game and one for audio.
Dual.
How much RAM does that thing have? Do you know?
Ooh, I have no idea. I'd have to look that up. I don't know. It was if I got it took my offer of $40. We'll see if it works.
Nice.
As long as I get around to trying to wire it up.
Yeah.
Well, if no one else has anything like that they want to talk about, that's probably good enough for our introduction. All right. Well, then we'll take a little break here, and we'll be back with some announcements.
This program is brought to you by Fallsoft and its many fine publications. Satisfying your computing curiosity is what it's all about. Fallsoft.
Radio Shack presents Great Moments in History.
Madame Curie, you were just awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. You look radiant.
What really pegs my electrometer are the savings in this month's Radio Shack flyer.
Look for your Radio Shack flyer in this week's mail. Save 25 to 50% on select items throughout the store.
Did you see my lab featured in Better Homes and Laboratory? The reviews were glowing.
Radio Shack, America's technology store.
All right. Now we're back with some announcements. This is, of course, the CoCo Crew podcast. We are available on Twitter with the handle of @CoCo Crew Podcast, all one word, CoCoCrewPodcast. We are also available on Facebook with our own group. This one is called the CoCo Crew Podcast. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Search for it and you'll find it. The CoCo Crew Podcast is, of course, available on iTunes and through Google Play for normal podcast downloads. And, of course, we're available on Stitcher and TuneIn for online streaming. So, Alexa, please play the CoCo Crew podcast. Trust me, it works. We are, of course, a member of the Throwback Network. This is a listing of retro-themed podcasts, many of which are technology-oriented, about old video games or computers, some of which are culture-oriented or otherwise referencing retro things mostly from the 80s, things like the Greatest American Hero television show and other crazy stuff like that. If you're looking for another way to spend some of your podcasting time after you get done with listening to the CoCo Crew, then we recommend you check out the Throwback Network. And similarly, you may want to check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Also a list of retro-themed podcasts. This one dedicated specifically to technology and gaming. So lots of podcasts about old game consoles and old computers. Again, if you're looking for another podcast, then check out the Game by Game Podcast Information Hub. Audio for the CoCo Crew podcast is hosted on Cyber Ears. If you have a need to host audio content on the internet, we recommend that you check out Cyber Ears, where you will get your audio on your terms. If you want to reach out to contact the hosts of the CoCo Crew via email, we have some addresses set up. The first group of addresses will all reach all of the hosts, including Boise. And this is show, SHOW, at CoCoCrew.org, CoCoCrew.org. Podcast, PODCAST, at CoCoCrew.org. Or feedback, FEEDBACK, at CoCoCrew.org. The next three, well, I should probably add another one here, but the next three will reach us all individually. I am, of course, available as John, JOHN, at CoCoCrew.org. Neil is available as Neil, NEIL, at CoCoCrew.org. And Mike is, of course, available as Mike, MIKE, at CoCoCrew.org. And I'm pretty sure Boise is available as BOISY, at CoCoCrew.org. So reach out and touch one of us. We'd love to hear from you. Before we move on to the actual physical events in the world, I've got a few extra announcements in here. One is the basic 10-liner contest is, I think it's already running. I think it's a European-centric contest. We can tell by the German rules. But if you are a basic programming jockey and want to test your skills against the best basic programmers in the world on 8-bit systems, then you should check out how to write or what the rules are for your 10-line basic programs. Looks like that is running with a deadline of the 24th of March, 2018. And the award ceremony will be on Saturday, April 7th, 2018 at the NOMAM in Lübeck. Is that Switzerland? I'm not sure. Maybe it's Germany. If you know where Lübeck is, please feel free to send feedback to feedback@cocohoo.org. All right, next couple are related to CoCo Fest. We are probably getting close to a good list of who's coming to CoCo Fest, but we'll always love to hear from you. If you are an attendee, we'll get you on the list of other attendees, or if you are a vendor or an exhibitor, send me some email. Let me know what you're showing. Be sure to get your forms into Glenside. We have a link to some email with more information in the show notes. Also, there is still a presentation slot open. There were going to be two. It sounded like the CoCo Talk folks were having some difficulties getting their people to the show, but it sounds like they've resolved that now. So we're back to one open slot for presentations. If you'd like to fill it, then let me know. Also, announcements there for the call for papers Boise mentioned earlier. I'm going to let him tell you more about the call for papers. Boise, you there?
I'm here, yeah. So the call for papers is about writing a paper on a topic that would be related to the CoCo in terms of improving a process or sharing a new idea. And that is still ongoing. There really isn't a deadline per se, although I would like to do sort of a hard deadline around 2 weeks before the CoCo Fest, so that we have time to review and prep the papers for printing and display at the fest. So yeah, if you have an idea, just reach me. You can reach me at the show email and share it with me. I'd be glad to work with you on it.
Yeah. Now, you plan to have rules about the presentation format there? Are you going to have require the papers in LaTeX or anything like that?
No, I'm not hard about that. Maybe for next year we would be a little bit more stringent. I'm just trying to get some participation right now. So anything that would be available would be helpful, and we can build more formality as we build the idea. But for now, I just want to kind of get it started and not put too many restrictions on it.
Cool. All right. Well, moving down to our event announcements. Of course, the number one on the list. I'm not sure if anything else between now and then. Certainly nothing more important. The 27th annual last Chicago CoCo Fest. They call it the last because they never know if there's going to be another one. Coming up on April 21st and 22nd of 2018 in Lombard, Illinois. This is our big CoCo event. This is our CoCo New Year, the biggest event of the year, other than maybe Tandy Assembly. But no, really, we all love CoCo Fest. We all want to be there. We all want you to be there. We're all excited there, showing our projects, talking to people, hoping to see some cool stuff and exchange some ideas and buy things at the auction or maybe buy things at the tables if people are selling. Should be an exciting time. So if you are a serious CoCo collector at all or CoCo hobbyist at all, find a way to get yourself to Chicago or the Chicago area, Lombard, Illinois, April 21st and 22nd of 2018. Very exciting stuff. Now, if you just can't make it there, but somehow you can make it to Atlanta the same weekend, for whatever reason, they have decided to hold the next VCF Southeast event, which is a good event and have been going there for the number of years, but I'm not going to be there this year because it has a scheduling conflict with CoCo Fest. But if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. That's right. So if you're stuck in Atlanta, well, at least you have another retro computing event available to you. So here's another one. If you're in Pittsburgh and can't make it to Chicago, I'm not sure how much sympathy I have for you. But the same weekend in Pittsburgh, your Three River area there. The Pittsburgh Retro Gaming, what's it called? Retro Gaming Expo. It's going to be held at the Ace Hotel in Pittsburgh. They're going to have tournaments, Super Smash Brothers, Street Fighter. Doesn't exactly sound like a retro event, but it might be a cool gaming event with some indie stuff. And if somehow you just can't leave Pittsburgh that weekend, can't make it to the Lombard, Illinois, I guess we'll write you a pass. If you're stuck in Pittsburgh, you can go to the Pittsburgh Retro Gaming Expo.
I'd go to that event, but I mean, I'm definitely not missing CoCo Fest.
Yeah, definitely not missing CoCo Fest.
I'm not far from Pittsburgh, so.
All right, the next weekend, April 28th. Now, this is a bit a ways away. Let's see, I'm still going to say 4th. I don't know. The Quattro something. Is that with the O after the 4? One way or another, it kind of looks like it should be 4th. Encontro Clube Color Rio. I'm sure I just stabbed some Portuguese there. This is the Brazilian version of a CoCo Fest, Saturday, April 28th, hosted by the Clube Color Brazil. If you are in or near Rio de Janeiro, sounds like a cool place to be one way or another. Go and check out the Brazilian side of color computing with the Brazilian fellows. Looks like a great bunch of guys. Should be fun. I wish I could go check it out. I don't think I can make it, but it would be cool. So if, like I said, if you're in South America or closer to Rio, then you have your target where to go. Coming up a month later in May, Vintage Computer Festival East 2018. Anyway, VCF East 2018 in Wall, New Jersey. Cool event. You see some big iron stuff there, plenty of 8-bit microcomputers as well. They have some museum stuff there, technology related, some of it radio related. It's a pretty cool event. If you are in the northeast part of the United States, looking for something to do in late May, I highly recommend it. You guys have all enjoyed VCF East, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
I'm thinking about going again this year. What about you guys?
I'm thinking I'm going to go too. I think I'm going to fly this year.
Yep.
It might not be a bad idea. I don't know. I was kind of had kind of written it off, and then they scheduled it. Usually they schedule it a week within a week of CoCo Fest.
Right.
But now that they've moved it back a month, it gives you a little more recovery time. So I'm at least back on the fence. Haven't quite decided yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that event. I think it's a nice place to go. It's a great environment. You know, it's on that old Army camp and a lot of stuff. They just really fill the time up well there. A lot of things to do.
Highly recommend it. Okay, moving on to July 16th to 22nd, 2018. If you're an Apple II user, this is your big event. Kansas Fest, held on the campus of Rockhurst University in Kansas City, Missouri. And it's a cool event. It's a week long. Stay in the dorms, hang out with your Apple II retro folks. Yeah, they're Apple II folks, but they are retro folks, so they're not so bad. A very fun event. They have a keynote speaker this year, Roger Wagner, who was the author of Assembly Lines, which is the way apparently a number of Apple II folks learned to program 6502 assembly back in the day. Should be cool. Have his perspective on the history of the Apple II and that sort of thing, the history of the home computer revolution. Should be a cool event. I've been in the past and definitely enjoyed it. If you're looking for something to do, an adult summer camp, this is probably the best thing you got going if you're a retro person. All right, that is the end of our announcements. I think we're going to take another short break, and then we'll be back with some news.
Can you translate your binary pulses into my computer? Try to form your thoughts into word patterns using binary systems. My computer can translate your pulses into my language.
Canadian color for the TRS-80 color computer. If you own a color computer, Dragon 32 or TGP System 100, don't miss out. Canada's first color computer magazine is now available on tape. It's published monthly and loaded with programs, reviews, tips, editorials, and more. Order your subscription today and save $12 off the newsstand price. Canadian color, now on tape.
Now we're back with some news. The news segment is always an important part of every one of our shows. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt keeping up with the news during the month, but I think it is an attractive feature of the show to have a semi-structured review of what's been going on. If you want to help out with the news collection, or if you think I'm missing something or whatever, use those email addresses that we've talked about in the announcement section and send me your news items. You can either send them to me, John at CoCoCrew.org, or send them to show or podcast or feedback at CoCoCrew.org. Like I said, I think we mostly get the news, the important bits, but, if I'm overlooking you, then please let us know. So moving on to our first piece of news, we're going to cover an announcement by Richard Lorbieski announcing the Boysen joystick CoCo Atari adapter. So he's got an adapter, it's a cable, plugs into the CoCo on one side, and you can plug an Atari-style joystick, including the Sega Genesis controllers, and should work with the CoCos and with the Tandy 1000. It has the circuit board is just built into the DE9 hood, so the 9-pin part of the connector. Cost is going to be $20 per pair, so you get 2 adapters for one price, plus shipping, of course, should be available now. So the link is in the show notes to his announcement on Facebook. It's got an email in there, email address to contact Richard. If you're interested, go check it out. Okay, moving on. This link is from Boise. Anyone remember the Maze program? Boise, you want to talk
corn?
about? You want to talk about this one, Boise?
Sure. So back in the day, we're talking probably about 20, 25 years ago, there was a C program for OS 9 that drew a maze on your CoCo 3 screen and solved it. And it would do it randomly. It would draw the maze randomly, and it would have a different entry and exit point and so forth. And it would sit there and draw. And it was kind of a sort of a screensaver type program. But people would also run it because of the novelty of watching it work to solve the maze. So with the CMOC C compiler project, I decided to try to use that C program as a test case, and was able to successfully, with CMOC and the OS 9 C support that we have thus far, get it to run, albeit not 100%. It's probably about 95% there. It doesn't do the randomness. It always draws the same pattern every time, and it solves it the same way. And it doesn't quite do the drawings correctly because there's a little bit of floating point required in the some of the calculations, in one of the calculations, and we don't have floating point support yet. But it works well enough just to show that, with a little bit of extra work on the C compiler, we could get this thing really performing well. So I was pretty happy with that.
Yeah,
cool,
great
very
progress.
Cool. All right, well, moving on to the next 3 items, our blog entries from Alan Huffman. You may remember from about this time last year, we had a flurry of blog posts from Alan on some similar topics, programming in BASIC and this and that. Well, apparently we've hit that same part of Alan's circadian rhythm for this year. And so we're seeing a lot of activity from Alan here in the month or two before CoCo Fest. He's been posting, and this time a lot of it's going to the Vintage is the New Old website. And he's posting on making BASIC fast again. So he's got some little tricks for programming in BASIC. They're basically alternatives, trying them out and timing them and reporting on what works faster. If you have something you want to write in BASIC, you want to develop certain habits or whatever that makes your BASIC program perform a little better, probably a good place to go and look. So very cool. The links are in the show notes. Next link is Brendan Donahue says a new CoCo VGA FPGA release is available. I released version 0.88 of the CoCo VGA FPGA, which can be found here. He's got a download link, fixes 2 minor 64 column mode bugs. Says he's attempted to contact all the CoCo VGA owners by email, but if he missed you, here you are, and you can contact him with the email address info@cocovga.com. So if you're a CoCo VGA owner, you may want to go ahead and pick that up so that you get the bug fixes. Very cool. I noticed also of late his hardware partner has been Ed Snyder's been releasing a few variations on the board design. The original variation only fit kind of a specific model of CoCo 2. And so now he's got a few more boards. Each one fits kind of a specific combination, a specific model of CoCo or CoCo 2 or whatever. But now they've got them covered with a broader range of boards available. Very cool.
Very good stuff.
Yeah, you guys have all got those cards, right?
Yep. Yeah,
it's nice,
I do.
Nice to see Brendan supporting the software on that. That's great support.
Yeah, good to see. It's good to see Brendan get some credit there. Sometimes he gets overlooked with the fan club or whatever. So it's nice to see Brendan get some credit for his project there.
You know, he's been working on that for a while, him and Steve Spiller. In fact, back in VCF South. Maybe it was Southwest. Back in 2012 in Dallas, he had a prototype of that board running there, so he has been working on that for quite a while, and it's turned out to be a rather mature product, so very happy to see that work.
Very cool. Okay, moving down. The next link, CBasic 3 versus MLBasic 2. This is from D. Bruce Moore. It was kind of a hot topic in the community. The CoCo Talk guys, I think, got into it a bit, talking about compilers for BASIC. Those are, essentially the same language we're all used to, but instead of having it run interpreted by the code in ROMs on our CoCos, actually have a compiler translated into machine code. Or I'm not sure all of these basic compilers actually went all the way to machine code either. Some of them I think may have done a little bit of a mix of the actual machine code and maybe with some ROM calls or whatever, which would still be machine code. But anyway, however they work, Bruce did a little investigation, kind of set them against each other, CBasic versus MLBasic, a couple of different versions. Be honest, you can read his report here or in the comments below it with the link in the show notes. Sounds to me like he didn't really have great success with either one. So if you are wanting to compile your basic program and hope to reap the magic rewards of higher performance just by running it through the compiler, you may be in for a shock. But I think, depending on if you choose a compiler and you kind of comply with its rules and expectations, I think you can get a nice benefit from some of this stuff. But I think Bruce's discovery was it was no real magic. You had to do a little work in it to get either one to work. Do you guys agree with that? That's the way I read it.
I've played with the MLBasic before. Couldn't get it to cooperate and even do the things that it was supposed to. So.
Yeah, I think one of the options that was discussed is maybe what's in the archive is not a complete or true copy or whatever. So I'd say that's certainly possible. Yeah, I don't know if the archive version is not good. Probably never going to see widespread release. I think I have an MLBasic package which included a diskette, but the diskette itself didn't read. So I can't be much help there. I don't know. Just have to get me to come down.
CBasic 3 is CBasic 3 the Bill Vergona package?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, I think I've got a copy of that, and that one I haven't really played with it a lot, but it's almost like learning a new language.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basic and it's compiled, but it's not exactly just run your old stuff, right?
Yeah, you're not going to just take basic code and compile it, right? You got to.
Yeah. Well, there is no free lunch, right? I guess we all have to learn that at some point.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, won't linger there too long, but we'll move along now. Our next item is from Jim Gary, and of course it's a program on the MC10. No shock there. The program, of course, is Forest of Doom, which of course is Bruce Moore's game that he had released for the CoCo. Jim Gary has been converting it so it runs on the MC10 as well. So if you have a Forest of Doom a thirst to play and you only have your MC10, well, you may still be in luck.
That's impressive. I mean, that's quite a bit of code there to squeeze into that MC10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say it's a much better use of an MC10 than propping open the door, which
yeah, I agree.
Some people seem to insist is the only thing the MC10 is good for. I definitely do not agree there. I think it's a pretty good computer to play with, and I think this is a good use of it.
And Jim certainly pushes it to its limits all the time. So
he certainly does.
If anybody's going to pull this conversion off, it's Jim.
Very good. All right, moving on. The next item. Let's see, arcade conversion to the CoCo overview. This is a blog post by Glenn Hewlett. Of course, Glenn has been, he's done he did originally with Space Invaders and then Pac-Man. And as of late, he's been working on Defender, which I'm sure all of those present somewhat different problems on one hand, but somewhat similar problems on the other. So he's given us some insight on how he goes about doing his conversions. In this case, he's not having to translate 6809 code to another processor or another processor code to 6809. But just because it's the same processor doesn't mean everything else just works either. So he's having to change, if nothing else, how graphic operations are done and where you can go to find coin inputs and stuff like that. So, pretty good blog. Definitely worth checking out. So, thank you, Glenn. Okay, so here's a neat one. This a video from Simon Jonason showing one of his recent hacks. So you have the three color bars. It looks like somebody trying to do a double Dutch jump rope style. Have you ever seen that when people have the two jump ropes and they do them both at the same time? And this case it's three.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. So it's a neat little swirly candy cane look or whatever. Kind of cool to watch. So I think Simon is incorporating that into his latest round of CoCo demo scene material. It's very exciting there.
Man, if only Radio Shack could see this, Back then, with these conversions with Glenn Hewlett and Simon Jonason doing these demos. Crazy.
Yep.
Simon is truly the madman.
Yeah.
It looks good for OS 9. We're coming forward with the config command. It all looks good.
Roger, CHX2/D0/command.
I've got a blowout in the CoCo 3. Reseat the Kiwi. It's no good. I've got garbage on the screen.
Correction. Cycle power for 30 seconds.
Both disk lights are on. She's breaking up.
The Color Computer, 6809, a computer barely alive. Gentlemen, we can rebuild it. We have the technology. We have the capability to make the world's first advanced color computer. The CoCo 4 will be that computer. Better than it was before. Better, stronger, faster.
website, thenextweb.com. Not really familiar with that one. Looks like kind of a techie-ish kind of site. It says report, 80s kids started programming at an earlier age than today's millennials. I'm not really sure why I'm supposed to be surprised by that. But I guess everyone just assumed that somehow kids today are programming from the first time they pick up an iPad or something. But, just because your kid can poke the strawberry icon on an iPad doesn't mean they're computer geniuses. Just because they can bring up Candy Crush on the iPad doesn't mean they know what they're doing, right?
This is the same generation that's moving out of the house later, too, so it's no surprise.
Exactly.
I think it's, we didn't have applications.
Exactly.
We just had a machine and we had to make it do something, right?
And we actually wanted to make it do something, whereas you throw a computer in front of a young kid today, then they're not even that impressed when you can make it do something. And it's like, well, sure, I could have had that 10 minutes ago or whatever. So what, Dad? Anyway. But it might be worth reading and pointing out that in some ways we may have stepped backwards in terms of technology education. What kids learn is not necessarily very technical, at least what they learn at earlier ages. But anyway, food for thought. Okay, so the next one is a WeFax demonstration. I think we talked about WeFax some time ago, but that's a weather fax. It's a way of getting basically a weather map over, I guess, a shortwave radio.
Yeah.
And I don't know how hard it is to put this equipment together, but I guess if you do have it, apparently there's still something going on to some degree, because Ron was showing a live demonstration, or what appeared to be a live demonstration, of Ron Delvaux showing loading a weather fax on his CoCo, which is kind of a neat effect, a neat thing to do. Makes me want to go out and dig out the equipment and see if I can make it work on mine. Can you imagine having your CoCo on your boat or something? It'd be kind of cool. If I had to be out at sea for months.
Yeah, I used to do that with Graphicom. Could do that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you could pull in. I did that off a shortwave radio before. It was pretty cool. But I thought in the late '90s they had that WeFax disappeared, but apparently that's not true.
Yeah, well, so I thought we'd had that discussion. I thought we looked it up and I confirmed it, but maybe it confirmed that maybe they shut down some service, but some other service is still available or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's kind of cool.
So just have to know where it is now, I guess. All right, moving on. Next link is from Hackaday, Jenny List via Hackaday, called Know Your Video Waveform. So if you're a budding hardware hacker on an old computer, at some point the video is going to give you a problem, most likely, whether it's somewhere in the circuit, who knows, that they're just going from the outside and converting the circuit to converting the signal appropriate for your monitor, or maybe it's on the inside on the board between chips, whatever. Sometimes it's handy to know what a video signal looks like. It does have sort of a distinctive pattern to it. So if you're ever poking around with your O-scope inside your computer and you see that signal, at least you have some idea what's happening there. This goes through and describes what's going on and what the different parts of the signal are named and what they're doing, why they look like it. I don't know, pretty neat. If you're already an expert on old computer video, then you'll be bored. You have to go back to fixing your CNC machine on top of your mountain in West Virginia or whatever. But if you don't know that much about video signals on old computers or old televisions, then it might be helpful for you. So check it out. Link is in the show notes. All right. Got a couple more blog posts from Glenn Hewlett. These both relate to his conversion of Defender to the CoCo 3. Well, one of them is sort of a progress report that he's gotten some of the track screens running. There was something about how a certain IRQ is being handled and how he's going to have to emulate it in the CoCo. I never did see him actually say how he's going to do that in the later blog post, so maybe that'll eventually come along. But some of them are also documenting, cool assembly tricks, or maybe it's the equivalent of the old David Letterman stupid assembly tricks, whatever. neat stuff that you can do in certain situations, cool party tricks, that sort of thing. But anyway, if you're interested in assembly language trickery, maybe something cool to read there. So go check it out. So the next one, this is what Super Mario looks like at 380,000 frames per second.
That's fast.
That's pretty fast. It's really just a curiosity. Gives you some idea of how things were working on the television and how the graphics hardware is working and that sort of stuff. If you're not interested in how the NES drew stuff on the screen or whatever, then you may want to skip this one. Like he says, the last line of the article, it's amazing to watch the tech work while slowed down. And by the way, old CRT televisions draw Mario's mustache in less than 1/380,000th of a second. So interesting fact to note there, right? I don't know. Maybe you like it, maybe you won't, but go ahead and check it out. All right, moving on. So I'm a sucker for mold making ever since I went to the trouble of making plastic shells for cartridge cases a couple of years back. Kind of feel the pain of anybody who wants to use molds to cast things or whatever. And I'm always interested in kind of neat tricks to do stuff. And so here's one. Let's see, what is it? Using lasagna to make cost-saving molds. Yeah, so my impression was that they somehow actually used lasagna in this mold making here, lasagna noodles. I'm not seeing it right now. How to build a weep mold. First, a solid part is cast in silicone. Check it out. They're doing something interesting and making a certain kind of mold. So it's used to convert a solid mold into something that's hollow with the help of some lasagna. So if you want to figure out where this lasagna comes in, you may need to watch the video.
A good one for Garfield fans.
Yeah, it's a good one for Garfield fans, exactly. So anyway, it can never hurt to watch a little bit of extra Hackaday stuff, right? So, again, check it out, have fun, enjoy it. If not, well, I'll give you your money back. All right. Now, here's a toy that I had as a kid, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Me too.
Yeah, the Big Track was a robotic tank. If you can see the picture of one, it had a numeric keypad on the back, and you program it in kind of almost like a very rudimentary form of logo or something like that, where basically the instructions were like, go forward a certain number and then turn right a certain number, and then you go forward another certain number and then turn left, and then you can go back a certain number. And you can shoot the laser a couple of times, which wasn't really a laser, just a light. Anyway, it's kind of a fairly primitive CPU in there that controlled the motors to turn the wheels and perform your instructions. And I've seen a couple of projects like this over the years where someone's basically taken and gutted the Big Track and replaced the insides with some other processor. In this case, they're using an Arduino, which might be a cool project to recreate. Or, maybe you pop it out and put in a board with a 6809 and a 6821 or something like that. I think there's more than enough room in the guts of the thing to hold a board with the proper 8-bit technology. Somebody ought to figure out how to do it. If you rip the guts out of your Big Track and replace it with a 6809, I definitely want to see you at CoCo Fest.
Get you an interview here too.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah, I had this as a kid, and it was a fun toy. It's amazing that what they're doing with it. And I've seen it. I've seen this article before in more detail. There's a guy that's got a great website, and he goes into a lot of detail on deconstructing the original board. It's just a great site. I don't see it linked here, but definitely out there.
Yeah, yep. Some cool stuff.
It's Big Track, the computer-activated tracker and the automatic transporter. Your child sends Big Track off on a mission by programming in up to 16 commands. Like fire 3 laser blasts. Big Track stores your child's commands to get out of a tricky spot. To complete the mission, Big Track rolls in, drops the payload, then heads for home base and another assignment. Big Track for your child from NB Electronics. Transporter sold separately.
All right. Well, let's move on. So this one's been around a little while, and I'm not sure why we never quite covered it yet, but we're covering it now. So this is the Moo, and it's all caps MOOH. Memory expansion for your Dragon. It's actually for your Dragon or your CoCo 1 or 2. The Moo gives your Dragon or CoCo 1/2 a whopping 512K of RAM and much more. And so I guess it's got, along with the RAM, it's got a ROM socket, and it features an SPI interface and an SD card slot, which is probably hanging off the SPI interface, would be my guess. So this is from Tormod Volden. Tormod's a Dragon guy, definitely takes a lot of interest in Nitrous 9 and also in Phuzix. Basically, he's produced a piece of hardware here that expands basically the capacity for running an operating system on a Dragon or CoCo 1 or CoCo 2, and brings it closer to the capacity of a CoCo 3 for running an operating system. And of course, the operating systems you'd want to run to be either Nitrous 9 or Phuzix for the most part. There might be some other alternatives, but if you're looking for a way to expand the memory on your CoCo 1 or 2 or your Dragon, this is it. Or at least this is one option for now. And you may want to contact Tormod and see about getting one. Very cool. Someday we all may need one.
Here should be available now from what I'm seeing on the website. This early 2018.
Yeah, I think people are getting them, so they probably are available now. So the next one is another Jim Gary video, and this is for Race Driver by Colin Carter, and I'm guessing that's the original program. Race Driver by Colin Carter was from a book of programs for the Dragon 32, now ported to the micro color computer, also known as the MC10. It looks like you've got a race car and you got a bunch of slalom poles, and you're supposed to go between them. Very cool. Looks like a fun little game. Let the video run. Something to do with your MC10. Looks like a lot more fun than propping open the door. All right. Let's see. The next one I'm going to let Mike talk about because it's something called GMC Demo 2 by Mike Rowan.
Yeah, I started posting these on the CoCo Crew Podcast YouTube channel, part 2 of the Game Master cartridge demo, using BASIC to drive the functions of the Game Master cart. So I'm working on part 3, which will focus on the noise channel and how that works, different modes for that. Another
good video. Another definitely enjoyed the tempo of the video, the pedagogical value. Is that the right way to say it? Very cool. Definitely enjoyed that one. All right. So moving on. This was came not quite out of nowhere, but had kind of come and gone. Would mention in an earlier podcast that there was this dispute out there in the video game record-holding world that people were disputing the long-held record on Atari's Dragster game. Basically, that somebody had gone to the trouble to figure out that the record being held was kind of mathematically impossible by their calculations. pretty much all I thought of it. But apparently it was serious business, and people have been pushing it out. And so ultimately they came down to it, and they have banned Todd Rogers from the Twin Galaxies records, taking his records away. Pretty serious stuff.
Wow.
So I know I'm at no risk of losing any records.
Yeah, same here.
I don't hold any. But yeah,
I'm
quite a
looking-
little upheaval in the video game record world there. What do you think there, Boise?
Yeah, I'm looking at this. This reminds me of what happened to Billy Mitchell recently with the Donkey Kong score that he supposedly used MAME for and wasn't supposed to use. Seems to be a lot of these investigations going on these days about the veracity of these scores. Really is interesting stuff.
I'm sure there's dozens of dollars at risk.
Yeah.
That's right, Mike.
Well, you never know, I
Nobody
guess.
them.
But well, some people's sense of fair play has to be tended to, and I mean, I think it makes sense to keep things fair. I'm not sure going back into looking at something from so long ago can possibly be fair, but you know, it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't at some point, right? But moving on from here, we've got video Solitaire by Mr. J. Diffend, which I assume is James Diffendaver. But it's not so much the game being played, is that saying he's testing a new MC10 ROM build using Jim Gary's Solitaire program. So I don't know if you guys have been aware of this project from Mr. Diffendaver, but he's basically gone through some of the ROM code on the MC10 and has been trying to refactor the ROM code, particularly, I think, for some of the math routines, but probably a lot of other stuff too. But basically trying to improve the performance of the MC10. It's like, well, that's dedication. Cool. You know what I mean? I don't know how many people will ever actually pull the ROM from their MC10 and replace it with something just because it's supposed to offer a little better performance. But maybe somebody will. Certainly James has. Might be easier to do if you're using an emulator, but I don't know how big that market is either. Pretty cool that somebody would stick to an objective like that and figure some stuff out. And it looks like he's got some significant. I've seen some of his other posts. Sounds like he's getting some significant performance improvements. So cool for James. All right. This is Alan Huffman. And this is his latest bender, shall we say. Wi-Fi CoCo using items from Amazon. An $8.99 ESP8266 development board, an RS-232 to TTL adapter, and 4 jumper wires to connect them, powered by a micro USB cable and power supply. Demonstrating a hook to a 4-pin serial I/O port using Greggy term at the highest baud rate, 1200 baud. Using a CoCo 3 terminal program or an RS-230 pack, and it can go much, much faster. Okay. Anyway, he's got a little video, and I'm not sure. I think this one just shows him establishing a connection to an internet BBS. He's been doing a lot of that kind of stuff. So basically, the ESP8266 development board is being loaded with a software package that's called Xi modem or something like that. Xi modem. And so that ESP8266 is basically a little microcontroller of its own. That's probably 1,000 times as powerful as a CoCo, or maybe 100 times or whatever.
Easily, yeah.
So all the real heavy lifting being done here is being done by that microcontroller. So it's running the 802.11 wireless protocols, and then the IPv4, I guess, internet protocols to establish a telnet connection or whatever. And then basically, once he's established that, that queue-like connection, the TCP connection, then he shuffles the bits from there back and forth to the serial port that the CoCo can then consume. So it seems to excite a lot of people. I'm kind of I have sort of mixed reaction to something like this, where okay, you made the CoCo talk over a serial port to something else that's doing something cool. Not really sure that the cool transfers to the CoCo side. You know what I mean? But
yeah, it's a terminal server. Yeah.
Yeah. But it does enable you to experience some of the kinds of things you used to would do with a CoCo using a modem to dial up, say, a BBS. And realistically, once we got past 2400 baud or so, the modems were just high-powered computers doing their own thing and passing you a serial data stream too. So maybe it's not really so different from that.
Yeah, it's worthwhile to be able to do surfing from your CoCo for sure.
Yeah, definitely it enables that. So it's a cool thing. My other reaction there is, well, haven't we sort of been able to do this with DriveWire for 4 or 5 years now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I would say the DriveWire is a much more impressive demonstration of using the bitbanger, but to each his own.
Yeah, well, that's right. With the DriveWire, you can actually get a little more speed out of the bitbanger.
A lot more speed, but of course, different method of doing that versus what Greggy Term and those types of things are doing. So
right. So, like I said, it's kind of it's cool. It's not necessarily my thing, might not be your thing, but maybe it is. So, I hope you enjoyed it if you did. All right, so moving on. The next one's a Jim Geary post, Alien Attack. Pretty clearly an MC-10, roughly based on game by same name by Scott McCann and Peter Lear. 10-line basic program for 10-liner basic game competition, which we mentioned earlier in the show. So pretty cool. Jim's already being productive on the 10-liner program competition. So if you want to get in on that, Jim's already ahead of you.
He's been ahead of us for years.
Yeah. See, Jim's got another video where he shows off Diamond Hunt, which I'll be submitting to the Basic 10-Liners contest this year. So there you go. Jim's got not one, but 2 games already in place for.
That's amazing.
So that's pretty cool.
It is amazing what you can make that little computer do.
Yeah.
And not only that, how can you get a game working with 10 lines of code?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of people do that. There's some tricks there, but, I don't know. 10 lines, that sounds pretty compact to me, but I mean, a lot of them are somewhat simple looking games, but that doesn't mean they'd be easy to figure out how to program.
Yeah.
I really like a lot of Jim's projects. Like I said, sometimes they are a little simple looking on their face, but, this is a hobby. We're not in a contest to see how complicated we can make things. We're here to enjoy ourselves. And so, I kind of like simple games. So pretty cool. It's pretty cool that he is out there pushing it every month. Kind of jealous. I don't know how he finds the time.
Yeah.
True. Keep going, Jim. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think every month is safe to say. I mean, we always have something to mention.
Yep, definitely.
You got a drinking game named after him.
All right. So moving on. Here's one from Ed Snyder. And usually Ed Snyder, a lot of times his posts are basically just announcing some project that he's done and made available for sale or whatever. But this one is actually him demonstrating kind of a how-to thing. So that's kind of cool. Something new coming from Ed. He's got, in this case, I think it's inspired by the CoCo VGA, which is a solution for video so CoCo can output to a VGA monitor, but you still need to get the sound out of the box. The CoCo 1 and 2, of course, are relying on that RF connection to get the sound out along with the video. When you skip the RF for video, then you got no way to get audio out. And so in this case, Ed's got a video, a YouTube video demonstrating how to tap the audio signal, use a couple of components to get the audio signal to the outside of the box, so that you can plug it in with speakers or whatever. That's cool. I like to see any of these little practical projects that kind of extend the life of the CoCo. Kind of sets the CoCo back into the modern world, or something close to the modern world. So it's cool to see these kind of how-to videos, that sort of stuff. Very cool. The next one's from James Jones, also writing on Vintages of Gold, and he's talking about some of the control structures used in Basic 09. And so he talks about different kinds of loops and if statements and that sort of thing, comparing it to line number basic and how things are done there. So very cool. It's good to see some output from James. One of the bigger brains in the community. And he specializes in languages and compilers and that sort of stuff in real life. And so he's kind of passing down some of that knowledge to the rest of us. I think it's pretty well laid out, and kind of can explain some of the differences. You probably do have to have some experience in at least one or the other of the languages he's talking about to really get it, but it's a good exercise for the brain either way.
For sure. James Jones is a good guy, too.
Yep. All right. I think this is kind of a neat project. So this comes from Kamal Mustafa. I don't know Kamal at all. I don't really think that the link is related to the CoCo at all, except so it's mini modem, general purpose software audio FSK modem. And so basically what this is a program to run on your modern PC that'll use your sound card and turn it into a 300 baud modem, which may not be the most utility of the world, except it's a great speed for talking to your CoCos if you're using a modem. I know a few people on the call here who've been known to experiment with 300 baud modems. So what do you guys think?
Yeah, pretty cool.
It works.
If nothing else, maybe that keeps you down to just one modem you need to hang off of a machine. You can, as long as you can plug it into the sound card of your laptop or whatever. Pretty cool. So maybe that'll be handy for someone.
CQ! Amateur radio enthusiasts, turn your color computer into a complete carrier wave Morse code terminal with hardware and software from Mytronics. The KA9FSQ-CW modem plugs into the ROM pack of your color computer and interfaces to your transceiver. And the KA9FSQ translator software enables you to transmit and receive Morse code at up to 60 words per minute. This fully machine language program features split-screen transmit and receive, a 255-character keyboard buffer, and automatic CQ using your own call letters. Or try the W9AV translator. Transmit from 5 to 50 words per minute and receive at up to 30 words per minute. You also get 9 message memories and a CW practice mode. See our newest catalog for pricing on these and other products. Amateur radio solutions for your color computer from Mytronics, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Radio Shack presents Great Moments in History.
Christopher Columbus, you discovered the New World.
Actually, it was the Vikings, but I did discover something special. Big savings at Radio Shack.
Look for your Radio Shack flyer in this week's mail. Save 25 to 50% on select items throughout the store.
Mr. Columbus, what do you remember most about landing in the New World?
I couldn't cash a check. All the banks were closed.
Radio Shack, America's technology store.
Okay, the next link is from Hugo Defort. He had a sort of a progress report on the same project last month where he's doing a GUI library for Color Basic, I guess. Basically, he's got some progress on his event model, able to handle kind of a greater set of widgets and whatever else. Long story short is basically he's making good progress. So what do you think, boys? Are you going to pick this up and put a calculator into your next Color Basic game?
I've been following Hugo's work on this, and it's pretty cool. I have to say, it's not something that I have a direct interest in, but
yeah.
I do enjoy seeing people come up with new GUIs and new ways of doing things, and I like it. I have to say, good work, Hugo.
Yeah, it is a cool project. I'm kind of teasing you about your color basic efforts, but
I didn't take the bait, John.
Okay, so the next two links, back to Alan Huffman, it's kind of the same project, really, but this is how physical CoCos will be able to play along with the Wi-Fi stuff, basically showing kind of the same sort of setup we had in the earlier link, connecting to his ESP8266 board. Then the next point being he announced his telnet to RS-DOS was successful. Says tonight I ran a telnet program on my iPad via AT&T wireless. I connected to my CoCo with a cable hooked up to the serial I/O bitbanger port. Says he ran the Greg Miller Eric Gavrilik program ASCII Express, set up for 1200 baud. Was able to log in and connect, and there was much rejoicing. I included it partly because, well, there was a whole lot of time spent on the CoCo mailing list this month talking about this project, so I figured we had to talk about it a little bit extra on the podcast here.
I logged into it.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
So that's cool.
So what was he running on the other side, on the CoCo side? What were you logging into the actual device itself, or
ASCII Express?
Yeah.
From Millalook.
Yeah, just basically you just type in characters, right? That's all there's. There's really no front end there.
Yeah, you're not telnetting to the CoCo. You're telnetting to a device that's connected serially to the CoCo.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Gotcha.
So yeah, it's I mean, like I said, it doesn't seem that much different from what you would have got with a DriveWire if you were using DriveWire's networking capabilities. But it's sometimes you need to restir the pot and maybe we get some more action this time. Get some more networking stuff. Anyway, I'd never heard of ASCII Express, so I included it partly just so we could talk about that. But he also mentioned in some of his other posts something he had gotten from Rainbow Magazine called Remote 2, and he cited the the month and year of the article. So I went and looked that up and kind of been investigating that. So basically there was a notion of software that you would load on your CoCo that would then reroute all your I/O out to your serial port, and so you could use this as a component of creating a BBS system. So basically, your BBS would run like everybody was just sitting at the keyboard, but this other software would use the existing hooks in the ROM or whatever to feed the keyboard in and output over the serial port.
That's what I was using. That's what I was using last year at CoCo Fest with the BBS.
Oh yeah.
Over the phones, yeah, that was exactly what I was using, and you could actually kind of get into a mode where you could, remotely control the CoCo.
Yeah. So that sounded kind of cool. I've been looking at that some. Could lead to yet another project for yet another tech segment. We'll see. As long as I keep punishing myself with these tech segments, we'll see how long I last. But cool. So there is some networking going on there. Like I said, it's similar to what's been done with DriveWire in the past, but in this case, it's using some hardware that, depending on your acumen with eBay and or Amazon and your willingness to wait and your ability to wire things together, you may be able to spend as little as $9 to get your CoCo online without the use of a DriveWire server. So, we'll see how that plays out. Okay, the next one is a YouTube video. This is Let's see, Dragon 32 disk loading using Tandy CoCo disk cart. There's been projects like this before, and I think I did some tech segments early on that kind of mentioned this possibility. So the Dragon computer is very similar to the CoCo, as I think we all know, including the cartridge port is electrically essentially identical. I think there might be a couple of signals here and there that are not really present on one or the other, but if they were present, they'd be in the same spot. Point being is that you can take the physical hardware design for a CoCo and plug it into a Dragon, and, for the most part, it'll kind of work electrically, but the software that exists may or may not be exactly the same between the two, and that's what's going on here. Is they've taken a CoCo floppy disk cartridge controller, a floppy disk controller, which seems to be a lot easier to find than a Dragon floppy controller, especially in the U.S., but even in Europe it looks like. They've taken that and replaced the ROM with a version of a DOS for the Dragon that's been hacked to account for the minor differences between how the Dragon and how the Dragon DOS cartridge and the CoCo DOS cartridges stop the CPU or synchronize the CPU to the incoming data streams. They do so similarly but different. And so if you want to use a CoCo cartridge on the Dragon, you're going to need a Dragon DOS that's been hacked to work with the CoCo cartridge. And just like if you were to use a Dragon DOS cartridge on the CoCo, you would need the same thing in reverse. But basically that's what this person has done. They made a video about it. As they say, there was much rejoicing. So I actually have a Dragon disk drive and a disk controller. So if I need to use a disk on my Dragon, my only obstacle is having to plug in a 240 volt transformer. It's a cool project, and I'm glad somebody figured out how to make those changes and made the ROMs available for those that want to use them. All right, very cool. Moving on. It's a post from Jim Geary to the TRS-80 MC10 Facebook group. It says, Mecha CoCo over on Yahoo, and that's actually Darren Atkinson is Mecha CoCo, created a keypole machine language routine that allows sensing multiple keys being pressed at once. It only works on real MC10s because there are conflicts with PC keyboards when using an emulator. Here's Tandy's Pong with the routine, and he's got a link. So if you're writing machine language programs on the MC10 and you have a need to scan the keyboard and detect multiple keys being pressed, sounds a little specialized, but maybe isn't that unusual. There's some code that's been released out there that you could use to do it. Very exciting, don't you think? Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty neat to be able to. That's a cool feature.
Yeah, very cool. Okay, one more Jim Geary video. This for Airstrip. Support to the TRS-80 MC10 from the VZ200 by Robert C. So this is a game that came from the VZ200, which is a Dick Smith VZ200, which was, I think, also the Laser VTech 220, maybe? I forget the names. Anyway, basically it was a Z80-based computer that used the same 6847 video chip that's used on the CoCo and the MC10. Probably the way it's used is probably closer to the MC10 in some ways. But since those graphics are similar, it's able to take advantage of graphics design or whatever and use it on the MC10. Pretty cool. All right, a couple more here. Here's a post. It's actually to an Apple II group from Javier Rivera. I included it because I thought it was interesting because it gives an explanation of why your plastics from the 80s are turning yellow. And so he says, with all the commenting that 8-Bit Guy's misinformation videos have caused, so I don't want to be part of that. The 8-Bit Guy seems nice enough, but so I don't know what the misinformation videos he's referring to are. But anyway, he says he feels the need to share this text from one of the discoverers of Retrobrite. It goes on to talk about how plastics of the era were using bromine as a flame retardant because it sequesters oxygen, and that the plastics are actually a liquid, which is a little weird, but it's actually the glass in your windows are also actually a liquid, just one that flows really slowly. If you ever seen really old glass panes in a window, you'll notice they're thicker at the bottom than at the top, after 200 or 300 years, which is kind of weird, but interesting nonetheless. Anyway, because the plastics are actually a liquid, these bromine molecules sort of float to the surface, and the bromine is sort of brown. And so, anyway, if you've ever wondered about why RetroBrite works, how it works, or why your plastic was turning brown in the first place or yellow, there's some information in this post that might be worth looking at. So check the link in the show notes and educate yourself. All right, so the next one, so we mentioned this a little bit earlier. The King of Kong could be stripped of his high score. It's an Engadget article talking about Billy Mitchell. If you've ever seen the movie from, I think it's 2007, The King of Kong, where Steve Wiebe, the school teacher from wherever, was the underdog trying to set the world record on Donkey Kong, only had to have the evil Billy Mitchell send in a videotape and snatch victory from him or whatever. The facts of that movie are somewhat in dispute. I think Steve and Billy get along fine, and Billy's actually a pretty nice guy. But in that movie, he comes across as a real prick, for sure. But anyway, so there's a dispute here, and it's a little bit complicated because you basically have two different score-keeping bodies that are somewhat in conflict with each other. So there's the Twin Galaxies, which is kind of the established main body, the one that the Guinness Book of World Records kind of falls back on or whatever. And then there's some kind of Donkey Kong forum that keeps his own set of high scores. And I guess they largely agree, but maybe in this case they don't. You have to read it for all the details. But basically it amounts to that I guess currently, at least in terms of Twin Galaxies, was concerned that Billy Mitchell had the highest score, but it was based on a videotape that he had sent in of him playing to the high score or whatever. And somehow or another, it was asserted that the game was being played on MAME, which apparently isn't necessarily a disqualifier to use an emulator, but you have to do so under certain circumstances, certain conditions or whatever, which I guess are there to ensure accuracy. I don't know. It's kind of funny just that there's so much serious competition going on here, serious rules and whatever else. So it's a little bit of a chuckle in that respect. But if you read into the article, you'll find that the part of how they established that Billy was using MAME on this high score setting video was some analysis that done by someone named Sockmaster that showed that you could tell from the way the video was actually being built up, the scanning of the video screen or whatever. Not sure I understand the details, but you could, by watching the video, you could tell that the video that you were watching MAME build the video screen rather than the actual arcade hardware. And
so John had something to do with this?
That is my impression. Yes.
Wow, that's cool.
The Sockmaster is in the article here. They've got a sock_master. I don't know how many Sockmasters there could be, but yeah. Anyway, we do know that our own Sockmaster is a bit of a Donkey Kong expert, so it seems likely it's the same person. Yeah, the investigation analysis of comparable arcade feeds and MAME videos, specifically by a technically inclined forum community member named Sockmaster, seemed to show that Benchill's footage comes from MAME. Playing Donkey Kong through MAME isn't problematic in itself, but there are strict verifications for MAME high score attempts that check that the run was, for example, human-controlled and performed in one continuous playthrough. I think at the time of this article, at least, that the Donkey Kong forum had stripped Billy of one or more of his high scores, but it still fell back to he had a high score that was properly documented, and so instead of being number 1, he was then like number 13 in the world or something like that. Part of the point of this is if anybody complains about you being too serious about your CoCo, you can say, "Hey, you think I'm serious? Look at these video game guys, huh?"
It's true enough.
So a cool story, bro. Well, why don't we move on? So our final news item, the ICT Game Jam follow-up with code. This is from well, we haven't had our interview yet, so as far as I know, the correct pronunciation is Joel Avi, E-W-Y. When we actually talk to Joel, he can correct my pronunciation. Anyway, he posted a couple weeks ago, or last week maybe. He posted he was going to the ICT Game Jam, some sort of event where people get together and write a game kind of in real time over a weekend or whatever. And he took a CoCo 3 and he wrote his game in Basic 09. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's
and then he got done and he came home and he posted the source code. So there you go. You want to learn Basic 09? There's your game. You can study it and see how it works. And maybe you can even reach out to Joel if you have questions. So very exciting stuff. Hope you've enjoyed this news segment. I hope some of you will be inspired to send in your own news items, make my life easier in the future. We're going to take a little break, and then we'll be back with some feedback.
All right, Frank, I've finished checking the doors from the outside. You're all set for your shift. See you tomorrow.
Good night, Ted. Being the night watchman can be a lonely job. But being the night watchman at a Radio Shack warehouse is an entirely different story. Frank can check out the newest realistic stereo receivers and Optimus speakers. Or the concert-made 600 polyphonic keyboard. And Frank gets to see all the latest Tandy color computers and accessories before you do. Like the new 128K Tandy Color Computer 3 with CM8 RGB analog color monitor. Frank's biggest challenge? Remembering when it's quitting time. Already? Radio Shack, America's technology store.
All right, welcome back. Now it's time for our short feedback segment. First one comes from a new listener, came through Facebook, Dave Fulton. He says, well, he's a little annoyed with us, I guess. This is the last CoCo Crew podcast included a really annoying EAS simulation. That's the Emergency Alert System simulation. That, for a number of reasons, is just stupid and not funny. Podcast good, EAS simulation is bad. I've got a ... there. I think I kind of quickly just answered back to him, trying to play it off a little bit, but he kept going. So he's got an annoyance factor high, especially for those that work in broadcasting. Why ruin an otherwise stellar podcast? So, sound like he's trying to be nice and say we have a good podcast, but I guess we pushed his button with the emergency alert system. So, I will totally blame Myro for the emergency alert recording there. Just kidding. It is really a joke. I'm sorry that we...
well, we do have a full refund for that today.
Yeah, exactly. We refund your money.
Well, we do appreciate the feedback. We do want to hear feedback, even if it's not great.
Yeah, so we will file that under advisement, and maybe we'll tailor our output in some form or fashion in the future. No guarantees. Hard to say.
At least it didn't cause any PTSD.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So, Dave, I hope you're still listening. All right, moving on. We got another piece. The little quotes here is actually from an email that he copied me on when he sent email to the Brian Moriarty, who we interviewed in the November episode. This is Carlos Camacho. He says, "Hello, Professor Moriarty. Yesterday on the drive home, I was listening to the CoCo Crew podcast, and your interview was played." He goes on to say, he noticed we had an interaction where Professor Moriarty said that he might have source code for the Infocom Z interpreter for the CoCo. Carlos was excited by that and kind of pursued it. And turns out that we ended up with a little package of actual source code that he made available through the Color Computer Archive. I did some investigation of it. That's going to be the subject of our tech segment later in the broadcast. So very exciting stuff there. Glad to have some listener participation, helping to make give us fodder for making the show better. So very exciting stuff. I think that's all our feedback for this month. So we'll take another short break, and we'll be back with a host discussion.
Floppy drives, hard drives,
real-time clock, RS-232 pack, game cartridges. I'm sick of constantly plugging and unplugging things into my CoCo. Eliminate wear and tear of your CoCo's expansion port with a BT2000 companion from Basic Technology. Load up to 5 cartridges and enjoy the benefits of push-button selection. Load up to 5 cartridges and enjoy the benefits of push-button slot selection. Each slot has its own indicator light. You'll know at a glance which cartridge is in use. And no more turn-offs. Switch to the next cartridge and press a button to restart without turning power on and off. Enjoy years of trouble-free operation. We use only top-quality components, and all our products include a 180-day parts and labor warranty. Save your CoCo's expansion port and enter a world of push-button simplicity. The BT2000 Companion from Basic Technology. Right for our free brochure. Basic Technology, Ortonville, Michigan.
All right, welcome back, CoCo Cruisers. Now it's time for a host discussion. Our discussion is just going to be myself and Neil and Mike. Boise had to take care of some other business. Our discussion this month, there's been some talk in some of the Facebook stuff. I've seen more than once somebody suggest that they were trying to put together, a team of developers for working on games or whatever, which is fine. But sometimes we get the assertion that teams make better games, or that the best games are made by teams. And I'm not so sure I agree. And so I thought we'd bring it out here, have a little discussion about it. We'll see if there's any alternative points of view here within the group. Maybe somebody wants to advocate for that, and maybe they'll convince me. So either of you guys have a position that you'd like to start with, or?
Well, I'll take a shot at it first. I do think it can be a good thing. In the case of, like, a good example is on the Apple II GS, you have the Ninja Force crew, and they pulled off some fantastic demos and games for that matter. But the thing is, it's rare. The team has to be able to get along. First of all, that's huge. If somebody wants to do something their way and not collaborate on something, then it could be a disaster, and then just nothing gets done. So that's a big part of it. If you could work together and somebody's a pro at doing audio, they can do chip tunes and graphics, and even the machine language coding. If you can share the tasks, that's great. But it's tough to pull off a good crew.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard to coordinate the efforts of more than one person on something like that. Mike, did you have an opinion?
Well, I'm gonna fall in line with Neil. It depends on who the team members are. There's a lot of factors, and it doesn't just apply to games. You can just say that in general. Do teams make things better? I can see some advantages to working alone as far as keeping all the pieces together in your mind. Keeping it all integrated could be troublesome with a team. Not impossible, but different dynamic. I guess teams can make better games, but I don't think it's necessarily a recipe that means it's going to be better just because you got a team.
Right.
Well,
so, I think, it kind of depends on, well, it just depends. If you're talking about a modern, or what they call a AAA game or whatever, high-end budget, try to make $1 million or whatever, huge amount of money kind of games that are supposed to look like feature films or whatever. Well, yeah, those games are huge, and there's just no way a single person can pull them off anyway, right?
Right.
But when you think of the history of classic games, to the extent that I am familiar with classic games, and talking about things like Pac-Man or Q*bert or Donkey Kong or Defender or something like that, almost every one of those games is sort of the work of the lone programmer, the one guy, and both within the arcade and or games on specific systems, and sometimes it's a couple of guys or whatever, or once in a while it's a guy and a girl or a girl, or a woman, I should say. The point being that a whole lot of these things were kind of one-person efforts. I think at this level, to some degree, you're talking about an art form, and not just the art of the pixel or even the art of the sound wave, but just the art of the game design or whatever, and drawing, turning limitations of the hardware into features of the game, and knowing where to draw that line and where to take those risks or those cost-benefit trade-offs or whatever is a bit of an art form, and almost no art form is something that's best done by committee, right? And it's a bit of a cliche to say just because it's a group, it's a committee. Some groups fall in line naturally, right? Sometimes you have people who they just know they want to do the music, and somebody else wants to do the graphics, or somebody else wants to do the basic game logic but doesn't want to do the high performance biz in the middle. And if you have a team that falls out like that, well, you're lucky, and you've got something that could produce some really cool stuff. Especially when you're talking about volunteers that aren't being paid to work together. The first little artistic conflict is likely to be the last. And, as we know, people get serious about art that they're creating sometimes too serious. Sometimes people make suggestions about Xmas Rush or Farfall or something like that, and I instinctively bristle. And it's like, well, it's just a dumb little game that I wrote, but it's my game, it's an extension of me. It's what I thought was fun to do or whatever. And so it's easy to feel like you're being personally attacked. And so imagine that on a game that, say 4 or 5 people are trying to work together on. I think it's kind of like what we've said. It's possible you could put together a team that could be very successful. Best is somewhat in the eye of the beholder, but you certainly could produce a very good, very high quality thing. But it's certainly no guarantee that having a team is going to make for a great quality game, even a fun game. One other thing I'd want to throw out there, when we kind of alluded to it earlier, the modern games, of course, are big, huge projects with team efforts or whatever. Modern systems kind of lend themselves to that a bit better. In a modern system, if you're doing music for a modern game, you probably produce something that's not too different from a MIDI file for the music, right? And in your game, you literally build a MIDI player, and somewhere in your game logic, you say, go play MIDI file X, whatever, right? But if you're doing that on a CoCo, there's no MIDI player to call in most cases, right? Or there's part of it's because there's no performance left in the CPU to run it. And so rather than go play MIDI file X, is pick up the next DAC sample and stuff it here while I've got five cycles free.
Yeah.
You may have to change the format of the music data or the graphics data to suit the timings or whatever that you have. There's old tricks that people do in old games. Things like sound effects that are created just by pointing your audio data into a random segment of the code, and that little piece of code sounds like a laser blast when you play it through the DAC, that sort of thing. Whereas if you had a team and somebody on the team wants to design the laser sound, well, they're going to produce that and they're going to have a nice sounding laser and it's going to sound great, but it's going to be another 6K of sample data or whatever that's you're going to have to staple onto the back of your program binary. I don't want to say you can't have a team make a good game. I'm sure you can. But I'm going to say that if you think you're guaranteeing a good game by having a team, chances are I think you'll find a rude awakening.
I think you're right. I mean, the CoCo platform is just not big enough for to warrant a huge team like PC games of today, console games of today. But one aspect that would be cool, again, if the planets aligned and it worked, is if you had a team doing some CoCo games, you can rip through them faster. Like you take Nick Morentis, for example, did Popstar Pilot, which is, is a high-ticket game. But I mean, what did that take him? Over a year to program?
Yeah.
So now if you had a team, it'd be kind of cool if you can offload it, and rip through these games in 3-4 months.
That might work, although probably more like what you're talking about is if you had one team member whose idea was to kind of squeeze out game ideas and then you just assign them to the next programmer on the team to do, and then they just do it at whatever as fast as possible, you might get more games out in a certain period of time. Or another variation on that might be if you decided your team was going to do nothing but platform games and somebody in your team wrote a sound engine and a tile graphics engine and basic I/O for platforming, and you just continue to work on that platform as well as possible,
right?
And improve that. You'd have a team working on the platform, and then somebody else who's more of a game designer just using the platform. Yeah. And there are pieces of code out there already, and we've talked about them on this podcast, that already kind of exist that are platforms for writing games. For whatever reason, nobody uses them. And I don't think it's a matter of quality of the platform. I think it's more about people that want to write a game, want to do it for their own purposes or whatever, which includes writing the whole engine.
I think people like the challenge of doing it themselves too.
That's
and the
right.
reward of doing it themselves.
And so, I don't know, it's just sort of a reality of who are we dealing with and what are you doing there, right? And so, while we might wish for a team to just show up and you got a sound guy that wants to do nothing but sound and a graphics guy that wants to do nothing but graphics, and you might occasionally find those people, right? It seems like Simon Jonason in particular is having good luck finding some people where he's got people who are doing music for his demo scene stuff, and we got other people who are willing to do graphics for his demo scene stuff. And so that may go a long way. Now, this is me. I'm the guy that did Farfall, so all my stuff. And I think it's a great game. Farfall, I did it all myself, even wrote the music.
And that's something too, if you think about it, I mean, say you had a music guy do that song. I mean, would it be as good, right? See, the thing is, when you're working on the game, that's personal. You started that from scratch and you finished it.
No.
You might lose that aspect of, the personal touch. There is that, that theory to look at as well.
Yeah. Well, like you said, the more you take away personal ownership or whatever of the game and transfer it to a team, then the less you'll have that artist approach to it. Like I said, I mean, you might find the right balance. It's possible. So I'm not going to say it's impossible that you'll get a great game out of a team. Just my point being that I think if you think having a team is suddenly going to guarantee you a great game, I think you'll probably be disappointed. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. I mean, the planets have to align.
All right. Well, as they say that I say, have we beaten this to death?
We have.
All right. I pronounce it dead. So let it be written. So shall it be done.
CoCo 433.
Well, let's put this one to bed, and we'll take another break and come back.
Hi, my name is Felix Martin. I am the Senior Lab Coordinator for CrushCo, located right here in Mississauga, Ontario, where we perform certified product testing. I recently received a request from Boise Pete to perform Nitrous 9 crash testing on the Tandy Color Computer 3, so I invited Boise to join us to review the results. We immediately set about performing 2 different tests. First, drop testing from a height of 74 centimeters. Then a more rigorous impact test at 56 kilometers per hour. I have to say, the results weren't great. While the drop tests often resulted in cracked plastic and sometimes cracks in the motherboard, the impact tests were simply devastating.
Felix? When I said crash testing, I meant software crash testing. I wanted to see if any of the updates caused software crashes, not physical crash tests.
Oh. In that case, never mind.
All right. Well, welcome, Joel. And let me see if I can get this straight. Is it Avi? Joel Avi? Or am I Avi?
Imagine this is the audio-visual club.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, that's what you said that before. All right. So I was still messing it up, but okay. Joel Avy. That's EWY for those who see it only in text and are pronunciation impaired like me. Welcome, Joel, to the CoCo Crew podcast.
Thank you.
So we're having Joel on. Joel's been a member of the community for a long time. I'm not really sure what Joel's originally famous for, but
I'm not sure that I am.
I know you had some involvement with as an MM1 advocate at one time, and OS9 advocate in general. I don't know, maybe you could just tell us something about your background with the CoCo world, and then maybe how you got involved with the MM1 and that sort of thing.
Yeah, okay. Well, the color computer was my first computer. I got a 4K color computer, and it must have been around June of 1981. It was a summer between 6th and 7th grade.
Okay.
Probably about the year before that, I'd gone to summer camp and met a kid who was writing a computer program on a napkin. And, of course, it was like 1979 or something, and there was no, not a computer for miles around the camp at the time. And I thought, well, if this guy can do it, maybe I can too. And so I bugged my parents to get me a book on programming. And so we went to Radio Shack and got a book on programming in BASIC. And of course it was for the TRS-80, which, not even Model 1 at the time. It was just the TRS-80.
Sure.
And so I figured that's what I was going to get, or that's what I wanted. And that next year we made, some kind of deal for a certain amount of money credit towards like half the price of a computer for grades on my report card. And anyway, by the time I was time to get the computer, the Model 1 wasn't available anymore with all its FCC issues. And they'd gone to the Model 3 and then the color computer. Well, the color computer seemed like the obvious choice, and so that's what we got. We ended up with a 4K CoCo and a set recorder, a pair of joysticks, and Quasar Commander. And so
Cool.
I plugged that into the color TV down in the basement, and it soon became apparent that I wasn't going to be writing a lot of video games, as my idea was, had been originally with a 4K color computer, and I needed 16K, and so I went to Radio Shack and got 8 16K DRAM chips and plugged them in and upgraded to 16K. But then I realized I needed extended color basic. And so it kind of went on and on. And by the time I was in 9th grade, I finally had a disk drive, 64K, which I think I had to take it to Radio Shack to do that because the board modifications that needed to be done to upgrade that one to 64K. And extended color basic and Telewriter 64, and I could actually do some real stuff. But that's how I got into the color computer, and then when the CoCo 3 came out in '86, I think I was a senior in high school and got one of those and used it all through college.
And were you an OS 9 user?
Yeah. They said OS 9 was the way to go, so I believed them. And but I liked it. I mean, it was pretty neat, and I liked the fact that I could do real multitasking on this 8-bit computer. My friend had an Amiga, which was very cool, and I eventually got one of those too. But he paid a lot more for that Amiga than I did for my CoCo, and so it was pretty neat that I could do real multitasking on a much cheaper computer.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So cool. So at what point did you become interested in the 68,000 based? I guess if you had the Amiga influence, there was already some interest in the 68,000.
Yeah, I just assumed things were moving along, and it was the early 90s, and I wanted to get something more powerful. And we'll see, the story is kind of interesting because I'd originally gotten a TC9 Tomcat.
Oh yeah.
So I got that, and I had previously repacked one of my CoCo 3s into a mini tower case with originally a 10 meg MFM hard drive on a SCSI controller board,
Mm-hmm.
And I think I replaced it with a 40 at some point. And I was using a Disto 4-in-1, Disto Super Controller 2 with a 4-in-1 board on it. That was my SCSI controller, SCSI interface. When I got the TC9, I thought, well, I'm just going to move this stuff over to the TC9. For some reason, the Disto Super Controller would not work on the TC9's expansion bus. So I ended up not really getting much done with the TC9. It was neat. I could play with it with floppy drives. I had probably a couple 720K drives hooked up to it, but I couldn't do quite what I wanted to with it. But I really liked Frank Hogg's idea of the K-bus system, this expandable bus system, and the fact that you could plug the TC70 into the same bus. It seemed like a really cool idea. At some point then, it probably must have been around 1994, I decided I was going to call up Frank Hogg Labs and see if I could get a TC70.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did, and he said, well, we're not shipping right now. And I don't remember what exact problem they were having, but I called back several times and talked to them, and yeah, pretty soon we'll be shipping again. And I got a wild hair and decided to call Blackhawk, who was the owner of the MM1 at that point.
Right.
I called Blackhawk and talked to David Graham, and he said, we can sell you a base system, just the CPU board right now, but we're looking for somebody to stuff I/O boards and memory boards. So we can't, we can get you something, but not the whole system. But we think we can do it sooner than Frank Hogg can. Okay. So I thought, well, I guess I'll wait for that too. And so I hung up. But then I got to thinking about it a little bit, and I'd worked a couple summers at the place where my dad worked. They were a manufacturer of electronic test equipment for avionics and communications radios and things.
Mm-hmm.
And I had worked in module assembly, soldering stuff together. And so it occurred to me, well, I can stuff boards if that's what you're looking for. So I called him back and I said, well, hey, maybe I can do that. And so I'm trying to recall all the details, but I think that the deal was that and the other part of that was that, oh yeah, and you're going to have to buy all the parts. So basically, he was wanting me to be a subcontractor.
Right.
He was going to ship me the bare boards, and I'd buy the parts, and he'd buy them from me. So, young and foolish as I was, I got my parents to loan me some money to buy a whole bunch of parts. And I think the deal was that they would send me a base system, just the motherboard and operating system and everything for free. So that's what we did. And then when we got the boards, I soldered a couple of them up, soldered up the memory board and the new 4 meg memory backplane. The original system had just a passive backplane connecting the memory board with the CPU board. The version 3 I/O board took the memory, the extra memory off of the I/O board and put it on the backplane. So I soldered couple of those things up, and then we realized that there was some kind of a problem with the SCSI interface on the version 3 board, and it just wouldn't work. So anyway, there was a whole lot of back and forth, and the guy who designed this I/O board and the memory backplane was, supposedly working on it. But and then there was another guy in Arkansas by the name of Ray Patterson who apparently did service work on the MM1, who was kind of working on it as well. My recollection is that sometime around 1999 or 2000, he finally got one to work and sent me some information, but it was pretty late in the game by that point. But somewhere in between there, he had sent me a reworked earlier I/O board so that I had finally an MM1 that would actually work with the SCSI drive. And it turns out that the new memory board would also still work with the older I/O board, so you could expand it up to, I think, 8 megabytes, which is what I've got in my MM1. I did a little bit of programming on that. There was a guy in Poland, I think, by the name of Kotansky, who had written a JPEG viewer for the MM1. That was neat, but it took a tremendous amount of time to decode the JPEGs, whereas the IFF files would load up almost instantly. And because they were not, didn't have the complex encoding of a JPEG. So I wanted to take that viewer and then convert the decoded pictures into IFF files that would load up quicker. I think what I ended up doing was Joel Hegberg had written a clipboard library for the MM1. Sometime in the sort of mid to late 90s, I added that clipboard library to Kotansky's JPEG viewer, so you could view the JPEG, and then I don't remember exactly what you do. Hit a key on the keyboard, and it would put that decoded image into the clipboard. I wrote another little program that would save whatever was in the clipboard as a CDI plot color lookup table IFF file. That was the native file format, the native graphics format for the MM1. I came to CoCo Fest in Chicago, and I don't remember now if it was the late 90s. It may have been 99. Met David Graham there of Blackhawk, and who was still sort of trying to sell some MM1s, and I think that was the last I ever heard of him. And I still have MM1 parts to this day.
That's funny. Yeah, I think probably about that same period of time, I bought an MM1 memory board. I think it was from David Graham, who I didn't know from Adam at that point. But
yeah.
But I have pieces and parts for, I think, 2 different MM1s here, but neither one quite works. Well, maybe we should all get together.
Yeah, we need to see if we can get good working stuff for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, as far as I know, the bare boards themselves belong to Blackhawk. But since I haven't heard from anybody from there for quite a while, I wouldn't feel too bad about shipping a few out with parts on them.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. I don't think you said, but so I'm assuming for a living you do something computerish.
Yeah, I'm self-employed fixing people's computers.
Okay, so you and Neil may have
Not,
something to discuss there.
yeah, not
That's cool.
especially interesting, but that's
Well, it pays the
that's
bills,
what I'm
right?
doing. More or less.
Cool. Well, so what I really wanted you to tell us about, you posted recently to the Facebook group, I guess, about this, what was it called, ICT Code Jam or something like that?
Yeah, the story behind that is that one of my son's friends was wanting to be involved with that, and he wanted my son Henry to come along and kind of help him. He was writing a game in Unity, wanted one of my son to come along and help him with it, maybe do work on graphics or playtesting or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the kids needed some adult supervision, so I figured, well, heck, I'll sign up for that too. And I thought, if I'm going to go to this, you know, I haven't played around with any sort of modern game development platforms or anything like that. So I figured, well, you know, I'm going to be the eternal iconoclast and bring a 35-plus-year-old computer. So I brought my CoCo 3 with a CoCo SDC and my CM8 monitor, and I had a laptop with PDFs of a lot of the documentation. I figured out by the second day that I really needed to have some of it in printed form because it was just forever to find anything that I was looking for in the PDFs, because most of them were not OCR'd. So
Oh yeah, definitely then.
It was kind of a pain, especially, you know, working with a little netbook, which is not particularly optimized for speed.
Yeah.
But it got a lot of attention. There were a lot of people who said it was cool that I brought this vintage computer, and it was so that was kind of fun. And you know, the Apple IIs and the Commodore 64s were complete no-shows. I don't know.
Shocking, right?
Yeah.
Did people recognize the machine, or did they misremember it as something else, or?
Yeah, we had a couple people think it was an Apple II.
Yeah.
I had to correct them. I had to correct them on that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our running thing with the Spielberg movie coming up, Ready Player One, which the book has a CoCo 2 in it. We're all expecting that Spielberg's going to make that same mistake and think it's an Apple II.
Yeah. I suspect so.
We're hoping for better, but, you know, it's a blind hope, I guess.
Yeah, well, who knows? I mean, with what Stranger Things has done with kind of the Radio Shack nostalgia, maybe.
Well, that's true.
Maybe
that
they'll
and
figure that out.
And Young Sheldon or whatever, that's been good too.
Yeah.
So you wrote a game in Basic 09, is that right?
Yeah.
And
yeah, I wrote. I had working code that was playable by the deadline. We'll put it that way.
Cool.
Very good.
It's not a good game. It's not a fun game. It's not a hard game, but it's something. And and I was working with you know, everything was pretty much done from scratch. So that's my excuse.
That's pretty cool. I love the somewhat novel publication method of here's the source code, paste it into a Facebook comment.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, that's probably the easiest way to do it. I can put it in a disk image eventually.
Well, there you go. Well, that's pretty cool. On the phone here with me, or on the call here with me, of course, is Boise and Myro and Neil. I know I've heard Mike chime in there. I suspect he's got a question. Any of the other guys have questions?
How long did it take you to write that game from start to finish?
Well, the other interesting factor was that the day before this thing started, my wife suddenly had need of an appendectomy.
Oh.
So yeah. So that impinged slightly on our time. We needed to spend a little time making sure she was okay.
For sure.
So I had a little bit less time than I might have, but we were there. The event started on Friday night. That was just sort of orientation, and they picked a theme, and the theme, and I kind of missed the picking of the theme, but the theme was one button. And so I the first night I'd come with my Tandy Deluxe joysticks, and I realized that was not going to fly, so I had to come back with the old the black one button joystick the next day.
Oh, you ruined my joke. I was going to say, the theme was one button, and your immediate reaction was, well, what else would it be?
That's right. How many do you need, for crying out loud?
Exactly.
And so I didn't get any real coding done on Friday night. Most of the coding was done on Saturday. They opened up the doors, they said early, and I'm not an early riser. We were able to sort of drag our sorry carcasses in around 11 or something in the morning. And so really the coding was from about 11 in the morning to, I don't remember, maybe 9 in the evening or something like that. No, it was maybe a little bit longer than that. It may have been about till 11, probably 10:30 that evening. And I had something sorta, but it wasn't quite at a presentable stage. Then Sunday morning we got in, and again, I don't know, maybe 10 o'clock or something, and I was able to get it to a stage where I could at least say there, it's something by the deadline at I think it was 2. And
Wow.
so that was what it took for somebody who doesn't, code every day.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean,
pretty good.
especially you had people around too, right? I mean, that's
Yeah, it was a
distractions.
pretty crowded environment and lots of talking, but it was fun. It was a neat event.
Oh, very cool.
So this was a one-man effort, even though you're surrounded by other people doing their own thing?
Yeah, right. There were teams. There may have been a few other people who were flying solo, but there really wasn't anybody else who probably could have helped me.
No.
With
Would it have been a
Basic
better
09.
game if you'd have had a team?
Oh, I'm sure it would have been a better game if I had a team of people who actually knew what they were doing.
Oh, there you go.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it'd be fun to get it, put a little bit more effort into it, and kind of get it to where I had sort of envisioned it. I was thinking of a kind of Missile Command like game, and at this point, it's very, very roughly Missile Command. In Missile Command, of course, you got these incoming missiles that come in at various vectors, and you try to intercept them. And that in Missile Command, and in like Polaris on the color computer, you've got they leave a trail.
Mm-hmm.
The missile is the end of the trail. And on this one, I'm not leaving any trail. There's just a little incoming warhead
Right.
that you have to try to hit. And at this point, they just fall straight down. But what I would like to do is make them, come in at different angles. And then the other thing I thought I would do to make it just a little bit more tricky is vary the visibility of the things. I think I would just fiddle with the palette registers, so that the incoming warheads kind of fade in and out of visibility.
Sure.
And as soon as one of them hits the ground, it's game over. So, but the judges did like what I did with the joystick. I gave it a little bit of a, I didn't want to try to figure out how to use the high res joystick interface. So I just had the regular 0 to 63 joysticks, and so I didn't try to map that directly to green coordinates, but used it to move the cursor, the graphics cursor, or the pointer anyway, which I selected the crosshairs version of it from the standard pointers. Since we have the analog joystick, and I don't know, how probably most of you have played missile command on the Atari 2600, and in my view, it's horrendous. You need to have some sort of analog controller for that game. The digital 4-button, 4-way kind of sort of pseudo 8-way joystick on the Atari, you just can't get to respond in a reasonable way, and it's going, just plain horizontal or vertical, and not any good. So anyway, what I did was I just made a dead zone in the center, and then move it out a little farther, and it would move the pointer by 1 pixel every time through the game loop, and a little farther it would move 2, and then 4, and then 8 at the extremes, so that you could quickly move the thing across the screen if you want to, but you also have finer control in the center when you wanted to get it lined up just right. So they thought that putting a little bit of attention into the game control was kind of neat.
Cool. All right, Mike, you out there? I know you've got a question.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of interested going back to the MM1 since I didn't have the pleasure of ever touching one of those in person.
Yeah.
How sizable did that community get? Do you know is there any sizable number of people still using them today?
Yeah, I don't know the exact numbers. We did not sell very many memory and I/O boards when I was doing that. We did sell a number of memory boards because that was working fine. But I mean, judging from, there were certainly a number of people on Delphi at the time that were using them. And again, that I know that I'm going to zone out on the names here. Guy who has been pretty active on the CoCo mail list, who lives in Australia.
Nick?
Bob DeVries?
Definitely not Nick. What? Bob
DeVries, yeah.
Yep, he's got an MM1. And that guy Kotansky from Poland had an MM1. So you could at least make the argument that it had international appeal. But
for sure.
Yeah.
And as far as who has them now, Ed Snyder has one, doesn't he? I think he has. Wasn't it Mike Knudson's MM1?
Yeah, I think so. He had set about to make a project of replicating it. I'm not sure where that ended up. May still be in progress.
Yeah, I think it's probably multitasking with all the rest of his many projects.
Yeah.
But I use every opportunity I can to sort of just prod him on that gently and kindly, because that would be pretty neat. I think if more people could see that computer.
Well, Joel, I don't know if you remember me. I certainly remember you in that at CoCo Fests years back, and had MM1. Had an MM1 at the time. I since had sold it, I think, to either RevCac, whose name I can't remember for the life of me, but his Delphi handle was RevCac. Keith Kuwansky. Yeah. I think I sold it to Keith. Yeah, I think I sold it to Keith. But I had mine in a tower, and I had the 68340 upgrade that Carl Kreider had made for it. Did you have that upgrade?
No, huh? I heard of it, and then I also remember that David Graham, he got a hold of one of those other ISA bus-based 68K machines. It probably was a 68304 or something like that, and dubbed it the MM1B.
Right. It was a 68306. Yes.
Okay. And the reason that he did that was that they had a license from Microware for OS 9 for the MM1. And we weren't selling any MM1s because the I/O board had a problem. And so he just called that the MM1B.
Yeah, actually, I have an MM1B. It's not actively used, but I do have one, yeah. That was the one that was based on the 68306, ran OS 9 68K, just like the MM1. And but was using an ISA bus and used ISA graphics cards. It did not use the what was the name of that chip that was used? It was the same chip used in the CDI machine. The graphics chip.
The Signetics 66470, I think.
Yeah,
VSC, Video and System Controller, I think is what it was called.
That's it. Yeah, so that was not in the MM1B.
Right. Did K Windows ever get ported to that?
No, there was another C-based windowing system called MGR that Carl had ported that ran under it, but it was not K Windows. There was some K Window-ish like terminals. You could do virtual terminals. I forgot what the key sequence was, but it was analogous to hitting the clear key on level 2, where you could have a different terminal, basically a virtual terminal window through the VGA text screen.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was not an official port of K Windows to that.
Yeah. Sorry. Did you have another question? Just if I had one of the upgrades for the.
Yeah. So you did not have the 68340, which was the MM1A upgrade to the MM1, which, by the way, sped up the computer quite a bit, because the 68070 that was part of the MM1 stock was I forgot what it ran at, maybe 16 megahertz.
So I think 15.
15, yeah. The 68340 I think ran at 25, and it was a faster chip too. So.
Right. The 68070 I think runs a lot of instructions in more clock cycles than the 68000. So
that's correct.
A 15 megahertz 68070 is probably not the equivalent of a 15 megahertz 68000.
That's right.
So it probably was a little faster than like the 8 megahertz 68000s that were in an Amiga 1000 or a Atari ST or something.
It was a Philips Signetics clone of the 68K.
Yeah.
Did you know Kevin Pease, the guy that designed the MM1? Did you ever interact with him at all?
I talked to him on the phone a few times, kind of bugging him about when would we, think about why the I/O board didn't work, and I think I sort of annoyed him.
Good.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Kevin or seen him in a long time.
Yeah, I had a phone number for him and kind of talked to him a few times, but that was about it.
He was in Tennessee last I recall.
Okay. Yeah, I kept in touch with the guy in Arkansas.
Patterson? Yeah, I remember the name when you said the name.
Ray Patterson.
Yep.
For quite a while, up into the early 2000s. And
yeah, I remember the name. He was working with Graham, as I recall, David Graham.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have some emails from him that explaining what he did to finally, I think, maybe get one of those version 3 I/O boards to work. So I need to see if I can actually find enough of that information. And at one point, he was drilling out through holes in the SCSI 50-pin connector and stuff like that. And I think I tried to do the same thing, but I'm not sure that was enough.
Yeah, and there was also the 9 meg. There was the 8 meg upgrade, backplane upgrade. You had that? There was
Yes, and that's the one I have parts for.
Yeah.
Except I don't think and those worked fine. And I've got 8 meg in my MM1. I think I might have run out of the power supply connectors. But I think I have parts for just about all the other parts needed to make those.
Do you have parts for the actual CPU board itself and CPU boards?
No. Yeah, I wasn't involved with making the CPU boards at all.
Oh.
That was surface mount.
Yeah.
On the CPU at least, and probably the VSC.
Well, unfortunately, that's like saying you have a bunch of head gaskets for 57 Chevys, but no one has a 57 Chevy anymore.
Exactly. It's true. But I keep thinking maybe somebody who does have one of the older MM1s might just say, hey, it'd be kind of fun to have a 4 megabyte RAM disk.
Yeah. Well, we might all have to take stock of our inventory of collected parts and figure out what we need.
Yeah.
But Joel, I want to be considerate of your time. I know you said you had a stop that you need to take care of. I do appreciate you sitting to talk to us.
Yeah.
Is there anything that comes to mind that we should have asked you, or that anything that you're dying to get off your chest, some deep secret from the past, or anything like that?
Oh, I don't know. But the only other thing that really did years ago when people were kind of first playing with the idea of, well, I guess it was shortly after the Rascan video digitizer came out, and they had a display where they would flicker 3 red, green, and blue filtered images to get a sort of pseudo 4096 color display. And then people figured out, well, you can do the same thing with the DS69 as well, which I had already had. I wrote a little program in KNRC on the CoCo that would, in OS9, that would take 3 color filtered images from the DS69 digitizer, and then merge them into a 15-bit Targa image.
Wow.
Which then you could was a sort of standard image file format. Then you could load it up on other utilities, typically on like a DOS computer. I think I had a 286 passive backplane PC at the time. That was probably my first venture into that I built from parts out of, the back of nuts and bolts or something. There was a DOS shareware program called ImProcess, IMPROCES, that would load up these Targa files and then quantize the colors down to 256 and could write out a GIF or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And so I put that on Delphi, but I don't think anybody else had the equipment or inclination probably at that point in time to try using it. But the results were typically not all that great, except that I did make some pretty good pictures when a friend of mine who had a VHS camcorder brought it over, but he also had an electronic color splitter that he used with the DigiView digitizer on his Amiga 2000, which interestingly, I think both the DS69 and the DigiView were designed at least partially by Tim Jennison.
Yeah, that's right.
So they're very similar. They work very similarly. The DigiView had at one point had this sort of color wheel that you could use that had colored filters that would pass in front of a black and white camera, so you could make red, green, and blue filtered images and make high color pictures. Somewhere in the Amiga magazines, people started selling these electronic ones, so that you could take a full color video image, and then you could just electronically filter out the red, green, and blue. Just switch to red, and it would just show you the red component, so on. So anyway, my friend's camcorder had a digital freeze, so you could take one of the other problems is these video digitizers took 30 seconds or more maybe to digitize a single frame. So if you were trying to digitize like a person, they couldn't sit still for all that amount of time. So with this, he could just snap a shot of a scene out of life, and then we could, at our leisure, digitize the three images. But that whole process took the software for the DS69 on RS-DOS to create the 3 pictures, and then boot into OS9 and use the RS-DOS utility to get the images off the disk, put them on the hard drive, then run my program to merge them into a Targa file, and then use a PC-DOS utility to put that on a 720K disk, and take that over to a DOS computer to convert it into a GIF, which I could display on the Paradise VGA board on that, or take it over to the Amiga 1000 or something like that.
Right.
So it was quite a bit of sneaker net going on just to make one digital image. But in those days, just to see something like that on a computer screen made it seem worth the effort.
For sure.
And now, you take a 4096 by 2000 24-bit color image 10 times a second on your phone.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. How much more capacity for dumb stuff we have now.
Yeah.
All those pictures of cats.
Yes.
All right.
All right.
Well, again, Joel, thank you for spending some time with us. I think it's been great to hear about your background and to hear about your competition there at the Game Jam. Sounds like a cool way to spend a weekend. Not sure your wife was as excited about it. I hope she's doing all right.
Yeah, she's recovering well.
Again, thank you. And
all right, thank you.
It's only a computer. Just a printed circuit board. Resistors, capacitors, integrated circuits, plastic and wires. And yet this simple device has been sewn into the very fabric of our lives. Teacher, companion, entertainer, helper. There's never been a better time to own a color computer. That's why more than ever, people are going to CoCo Fest. Together, we're making the color computer prouder, stronger, and better. Join us April 21st and 22nd in Lombard, Illinois. CoCo Fest. Make it your own.
Welcome, CoCo Cruisers. This is John, and I'm going to do another tech segment this month. This is a tech segment for February 2018. It'll be episode 33. Very exciting. Also, though, the tech segment here will mostly be a revamp of a blog entry I've already published. You may have already seen it. I hope those will still provide some entertainment value if you've already seen the blog. If you haven't already seen the blog, I will include a link to it in the show notes so you can go back over it and scribble things down if you need to, that sort of thing. All right, so something kind of exciting happened this month, and it's in reference to an episode or something happened in an episode a couple of months ago when we interviewed Brian Moriarty of the famous Infocom company back in November 2017. So Brian was not only a game writer, game designer, or whatever for Infocom and some later companies. He actually was the software developer behind at least some of their Z interpreter programs, and in particular, he wrote the one for the Tandy color computer. So that's kind of cool. And as we were interviewing Professor Moriarty, he divulged that he thought he might have the source code for that Z interpreter, also known as a zip. Not zip as in the compression, but zip as in Z interpreter for Infocom, Z machines. Anyway, he might have the source code for that zip laying around somewhere, probably printed out on paper. And he mentioned where he lived, the Massachusetts area. One of our listeners, Carlos Camacho, perked up because he lived nearby. And so he reached out to the professor and started querying him about if he could actually find that source code, and maybe Carlos could come by and take the printouts and scan them and make them available for us. Anyway, I knew Carlos was going to reach out, but I didn't know what had happened after that. And then a little while later, he reappears and says, oh, by the way, the professor sent me this. And so he'd gone a bit better. Instead of just having a printout of the source code, he actually produced a funny thing, a zip of the zip. So an actual zip file containing the source for the Z interpreter, which Carlos has since made available through the Color Computer Archive. Looking through that code has been kind of interesting. Not only is it interesting from how did professional programmers back in the day do cool things on the 6809 kind of perspective, but also it's got kind of the usual tantalizing comments that are fun to try to decipher. Some that may reference inside jokes or whatever else, but some that reference the kind of what might have been. There's comments in there about an OS 9 version of the zip, which as far as I know never actually materialized, but maybe they took a few baby steps in that direction. So what we have now is a collection of source code files that were written to be consumed by an unknown assembler, presumably one that ran under, under DOS or maybe CP/M on the DEC Rainbow. Is a bit different from anything else we've got running today. So if you want to take a look at the assembler's source code, if you want to try to do anything with it yourself, or if you just want to, learn from it or experiment with it or whatever, you're gonna have to take some actions. And so I've done some of that stuff, and I'm gonna kind of guide you through it a little bit. So at this point, I would like to note, we are talking about the code that is the intellectual property of Infocom, which Infocom per se no longer really exists, but I'm sure it was acquired and has legal heirs that do technically still own that intellectual property. Obviously, having access to the source enables you to violate that intellectual property rights in any number of ways. I'm not advocating that you do that. I am going to talk a little bit about it from a historical perspective and how you might pursue some investigation of that history or whatever, but that's all it is, okay? Do not try this at home. I guess that's what they would say on Jackass or whatever. So the first thing you want to do if you do get the source code in hand is you want to, any source code really, is you want to try to build it. Good software engineering practice suggests that even before you try to build it, you should probably check it into some sort of a revision control system. So I'm an open source guy, I'm a Linux guy, and a relatively modern software developer, and so for me that all adds up to one particular source code control system that's called Git. And the lovely thing about Git is you can build a repository and keep it on your local system and do all kinds of cool stuff with it. Then later, if you want to push it up to GitHub or whatever, then so be it. But or if you want to share it in other ways, there's ways to take care of that too. Anyway, Git's a cool system. So first you take down the source code. It comes in a zip file. You make a directory, cd into it. You do a git init of that directory, which kind of sets up the initial data structures for your source code control system. You unzip the zip file. The code comes out. For whatever reason, it's got all its permissions set to be read only on all the files. So you want to do a chmod, assuming you're on a Linux or a similar style of system. So you chmod it so at least you can write the files. You add them all to Git and then do an initial commit, something like initial import of the code, that sort of thing. So, okay, great. So you want to try to boot some code. Well, it turns out there's really two binaries in that set of assembly code, or source for two binaries. One of which is, of course, the main zip Z interpreter, but there's also a physically separate program that is the boot track that runs when you type the DOS command. Just a little refresher that the DOS command reads in data from track 34 and puts it in memory. I think it hex offset 2600. I think that's correct. Wherever it puts it, it looks for the letters O and S as the first two characters, and if it finds them, it jumps to the third byte in. If you look at the boot.source file, you'll see that OS at the beginning and then code to relocate code and unpack code from disk and that sort of thing. So, whatever. So why don't we just try building that, right? Well, you pull out your modern assembler. Most people in the CoCo world these days use LWSM. I think that's true. At least most people, the most vocal people will say that. So why don't you just throw a standard LWSM command at it, something like LWSM-9, -L for a log file, -F format, raw, because we're building code that is basically an absolute binary. -O for output, we're going to call it boot.trk for boot track, and then boot.src. run that, and instead of getting a completed assembly, you'll get a bunch of errors. And they'll say stuff like error, bad opcode, and then a little sample code that at first glance doesn't really look all that wrong, but like DB and $09 or $OD, whatever. So what's going on? Well, the different kinds of assemblers, for whatever reason, they tended to differentiate the language they accepted a bit in the terms of how they implemented their pseudo-ops. And a pseudo-op is it's something in the assembly source code that at first glance looks like an assembler instruction, but in fact, rather than being something that translates to a byte that goes in memory and gets consumed by the CPU, in fact, it's something that really is an instruction to the assembler to do something with whatever data you want to do there. Some of the most common sorts of pseudo-ops you'll see that are they're data declarations. There's a couple of different types of formats for those that were adopted widely. You see DB for data bytes. Sometimes you see a period DB. Some other assemblers will use FCB, which would be like form constant byte, that sort of thing. And so what you're hitting here is the format for these pseudo-ops that are being used by the original Infocom assembler or whatever. Just needs to be a little different for LWSM. And so, for example, the DB tab $0D needs to be period DB and then tab or space or whatever $0D. And there's a number of similar places like that. A few of them are different types of opcodes. A whole lot of them are DB, whatever. So the first step is to apply a patch that basically cleans up all the syntax in all the source files to match what LWSM expects. And so there'll be a link in the show notes if you want to look at the patches that I'm applying here. There's a link that points to the directory that has them all in there. But the first patch that gets applied is called LWSM-compat.patch. Now, patch, in this case, a patch file is a formatted file that basically tells a very special editor called, patch. It tells patch how to perform certain edits automatically. So rather than you have to open an editor and go to a certain line and make a certain change with the keyboard, you tell patch to apply a patch file, and it goes and makes the edits for you. So if you use my patch file, it's lwsm-compat.patch. It'll make all these changes. If you look inside, you'll see how the changes go. But they're mostly, like I said, just converting pseudo-ops. There's a couple of things where some files have different names for whatever reason. It fixes up stuff like that. But anyway, once you run it and apply the patches, which in the blog I showed using git am for applying the patch, then you'll be able to rerun that LWSM command from before, and this time it'll run, and it'll produce a 597-byte file named boot.trk. And if you compare that boot.trk to the first 597 bytes on track 34 of any of the Infocom game diskette images in the Color Computer Archive, any of them that matched version C of the interpreter, and in fact I think version D as well, because I think both C and D use the same boot tracks, you'll find that this is the exact same 597 bytes. So we're on track. So much better. Now, most software developers, or most serious developers, they don't all use the same tools I do, but most of them will at least create some sort of script that automates their build systems when they're trying to build something. Because quite often you need to get in a kind of a quick cycle where you'll make small changes and then rebuild the code and then run it or do whatever, and then come back and make another small change and build the code again or whatever. And the commands for building code sometimes can be a little complicated. And so rather than have to remember them all, and worse, have to type them all every time, you put them in some sort of script, or in my case, you put them in a make file. Now, make is an old tool from the Unix operating system. It's old, but still quite time-honored and useful. And the basic idea of make is you describe source files, or you describe files well, you describe what files need to be built, and then for each file that needs to be built, you specify other files that are essentially inputs to that file, so that if those input files change, then you're saying, if this file changes, then execute this command to build this result. And then sometimes that result will also be what's called a prerequisite to a later rule. So you get kind of a cascade effect in some cases. Anyway, it's a useful tool. And so I added a makefile for building both boot.track and the zip itself. And so that's the next patch to apply. If you look in my patch directory or whatever, you'll see a patch file called add-makefile.patch. So when you apply that, now you can run the build with just by typing the word make for make. And when you do that, now alongside your 597 byte boot.trk file, now you'll have a 5,824 byte file named cocozip.img. And if you compare this to the first few tracks of your Color Computer Archive disk Infocom diskette images, you'll see that again you have an exact match, for at least for the ones with the version C interpreter. If you've been keeping up on the Infocom discussions on the podcast or on the blog, you'll note that there was at least one later version of the archive or of the Z interpreter. There was a version D. In fact, there was also an early one called version A. I'm going to assume nobody's all that interested in having version A, because typically you would think that the version C would be a later and improved version, and then version D would be later and improved on top of that. So the source code that we got is specifically for the version C interpreter. Because it now enables us to build version C and have some source to provide context for different bytes in the file, that sort of thing. And because we have the version D binaries out in the world or whatever, this was kind of gets them close enough that it wasn't that bad of a job for me to then take and figure out what were the actual binary differences between the version C and version D Z interpreters. And I added code patches to actually, without any context for what instructions they were, I just put in data bytes into the interpreter so that when it's assembled, it would come out as a binary match for the version D interpreter. And then once I had that building correctly, I was able to then go and take those sections of mysterious data bytes and run them through a disassembler, which would tell me what the matching assembly language instructions were for those blocks of data. And in all the cases I found, I was then able to take and kind of reconstruct a reasonable source there, including some reasonable comments for what those pieces were doing for the most part. And so, looking at that, I found that mostly what you had looked like bug fixes or maybe a minor feature enabling some differences in how save games were handled. I went ahead and did that and applied it to or created patches for that. But in this case, I actually have two patches. So of note, one of the changes that is between the version C and the version D interpreters is the removal of the so-called Tandy bit. The Tandy bit is kind of an interesting historical note that the early Infocom games actually was set, the ones from Tandy, the ones distributed by Tandy, would set a certain bit in the interpreter, and then when running the Z interpreter code, the code could check the Tandy bit and then change its behavior. Typically this would tone down the language a bit, or in some cases I think it threw out some references to Radio Shack or Tandy or something like an advertising thing. I don't know. But that was one of the changes between the version C and version D Z interpreters for the CoCo. The other ones were, like I said, were all bug fixes, minor updates. So I lumped those into another patch. So there's a patch called remove-tandy-bit.patch, and then another one called update-2-version-D. You really need both patches to update to version D, but I left the remove tandy bit one as a separate patch because You could apply it to the version C interpreter if you, for some reason, you wanted to use the version C interpreter but see what it was like without the Tandy bit. And also had it as a separate patch because you might want to go to the version D interpreter, but for whatever reason you may want to keep the Tandy bit on to see what Tandy would have wanted you to see. It's there, it's broken out, you can do it however you want. At this point I should note that Professor Moriarty seems unaware, or seemed to have been unaware, of the existence of version D of the interpreter. So we're not 100% sure where version D came from. So there's a chance that version D actually was the work of, some lone hacker who then somehow distributed his changes widely enough that all of the things claiming to be version D, which shows up multiple times in the Color Computer archive, and they all match. So given that fact that they all match, they're not, randomly different or whatever, and the version D changes seem to be bug fixes and minor features, to me that suggests that this is the kind of work that you would expect a software house to do while maintaining a product. I'm inclined to think that version D is legit from Infocom, and for whatever reason, Professor Moriarty just was unaware of it. Now, the Tandy bit part kind of calls that back into question a little bit. So, if you have this thing, this Tandy bit, why would Infocom suddenly decide to remove it as they went from version C to version D? Was there some change in the corporate relationship between Tandy and Infocom? It seems possible, but I'm not really sure what would do that. Did Tandy stop distributing the Infocom games at some point? I'm not sure if that's true or not. I don't remember seeing them when I later worked at Radio Shack in the early 90s. But by then, most of the CoCo stuff was gone anyway. So, it's hard to tell. It could be simply that there was no actual corporate change, but maybe the maintenance programmer at Infocom came across it, and maybe they were personally offended by this little single bit, literally a single bit of censorship, and they took it out. Who knows? If you are that maintenance programmer that took that bit out, I would love to hear from you. Please send us an email. feedback@cococrew.org. So now we do have reasonable source code for version D, or you can go back to the version C source code if you're somehow more comfortable with that. It's possible to make changes. There are reasonable changes that are desirable if you want to experience Infocom games on a CoCo 3, or even a later CoCo 2. On the CoCo 3, you may want to enable an 80-column mode, or maybe even a 40-column mode, or whatever. There's, the CoCo VGA has a 64-column mode. I guess the CoCo 3 also has a 64-column mode. So you may want to use one of these different screen widths. Looking in the source code, it's not too hard to find the changes that I think are necessary for that. You can see kind of where they're doing things. If you have a CoCo 3, or if you have a what's called CoCo 2B that has the later 6847 variant, you may want to use true lowercase. You can find in the interpreter where he's actually changing all the text to uppercase for the CoCo, but the game file itself has lowercase data for a lot of the text. So if you'd rather see the true lowercase, you could take out those changes where we're converting everything to uppercase. Again, fairly simple to find. And you can go farther. Apparently, so it's pretty clear that the code is handling its own disk accesses directly, which of course breaks when running under drive wire, or probably would break under HDB DOS running on an actual hard drive like the Super IDE or whatever. Maybe worthwhile to change that in one way or another, either forcing it back to using the ROM or in memory system. They're not really system calls, ROM calls. Well, you can just copy over the appropriate ones. Whatever. Anyway, there's some reasonable changes to be made. I'm kind of looking forward to doing some of that myself. I'm not going to get to it before, say, CoCo Fest. CoCo Fest is coming. If you do want to work on those, I'd appreciate it if you just give me a heads up. Maybe we could work together. Maybe I could save you a little time with some advice. I'd prefer not to be blindsided by somebody going off and working with this stuff. But things like that have happened in the past, so it wouldn't be the first time. I think that about covers where we are. So we have source code for the Z interpreter from Infocom. We can build it. We're in a position we can make reasonable changes to it. If you want to go farther with it, put it on top of Fusix or OS9 or Flex or whatever. That's probably possible, more possible now than it was before. It's probably easier to do it with the source code than to try to write your own. Of course, writing your own is legally the correct thing to do, so that's what I would have to advise. But anyway, probably rambled on enough about this now. So if you're an Infocom game rat and you want to see the internals of the Z interpreter, if you want to try your own changes, the code is there. It's waiting for you. So enjoy CoCo forever. You can only be young once, but you can be retro forever.
Bring home the CoCo. Bring home the CoCo. Everybody's happy when you bring home the CoCo. Bring home the CoCo. Bring home the CoCo. Everybody's happy when you bring home the CoCo. Bring home the CoCo. Bring home the CoCo. Everybody's happy when you bring home.
What is it, Mom? It's CoCo, dear. The CoCo gives you energy, makes you strong.
I can hardly wait. Wow, keen.
I'm glad you like it. Start the day off right with CoCo.
Ask your mom to get CoCo today.
Hello, my name is Boise Pete. Welcome to a new segment on the podcast called the OS9 Corner. As many of you know, OS9 was created as an operating system for the 6809 microprocessor by Microware Systems Corporation of Des Moines, Iowa in 1979. Tandy chose OS9 as its de facto operating system for the color computer in 1983, and it has been part of the CoCo ever since. For some, OS9 has been a stepping stone to learning about the underlying fundamentals of modern operating systems and how they are organized. For others, it has been a platform for running multiple applications simultaneously due to its multitasking capability. And yet many see OS9 as a mystical piece of software with a seemingly dystopian interface. Much has been made recently by some in the CoCo community about the perceived lack of OS9's ease of use. While there is certainly a baseline of understanding required to make use of OS9, it is not beyond the reach of common CoCo users to understand the concepts and gain some real benefits in using it. This is even more true today since the operating system is being constantly improved upon and adapted to new hardware in its current incarnation, Nitrous 9. I hope that with this series, the mysteries of OS9 can be unlocked and that you develop an appreciation for its design, which was quite avant-garde for its day. In this first segment, I want to introduce a central concept in the OS9 operating system, the module. The module is a packaged set of bytes that is organized with a defined structure. Every module contains a header, which resides at the beginning, and a trailer that resides at the end. In between the header and the trailer are bytes which represent 6809 machine code and data. Since the module organizes code and data into linear blocks, they can be represented as files on external storage, such as disk, or loaded into memory. Every module starts with 2 bytes, hex H7 and hex CD, Charlie Delta. This is the sentinel that indicates the start of a module. Following those 2 bytes are other bytes which provide information about the module, such as its type. Is it a program module, a device driver, a file manager? There is also a language byte which indicates if it's 6809 machine code or an intermediate code like Basic 09i code. Following that is the offset into the module where its name resides. Each module has a name, and that name is an indicator of the module's purpose. Modules are useful when they are loaded into memory. There they can perform their intended function. OS9 manages the loading of modules from disk and their organization within memory through a special directory called the module directory. The module directory resides in memory and keeps track of what modules are loaded, where they are loaded, and the number of times they have been accessed. Since one of OS9's key features is reentrancy, or the reuse of the same module by multiple processes, the module directory keeps a link count of every module. This link count is incremented as the module is accessed, and decrement it when the access is complete. When a module's link count goes to 0, it is ejected from the module directory, and the memory it occupied goes back to the free memory pool. In closing, the module is a central concept in OS 9 that encapsulates code or data that is loaded from disk into memory. Every program, subroutine, device driver, or other system component resides in this form. Modules are loaded into memory and utilized until their link count goes to 0, at which time they are removed. That's the OS 9 corner for this episode. Thanks for listening.
1863. Confederate forces invade the northern states. Battle of Gettysburg. A tactical battle simulator that allows you to lead thousands of soldiers in the Battle of Gettysburg as commander of the Union Army. Your decisions and military performance play a crucial role in the result. Lead your army and win the Battle of Gettysburg. Rainbow Magazine says, this game provides the best feel of any tactical game for the color computer. Color Computer News says, win or lose, you will know you have been in a battle. Battle of Gettysburg requires 16K extended basic with joystick and cassette. Battle of Gettysburg from Soft Ride.
The Tower of Power is what the CoCo is to me, baby. With the Commodore 64 on the bottom and the CoCo 3 on the top. Hello, and welcome back to Neil's Corner on episode 33. I've decided to change the name of my segment to just Neil's Corner from now on instead of The Games Corner, because I don't always review a game, such as this month I'll be talking about... Yep, you guessed it, modems and BBSing. My first experience with modems was with a Tandy DCM6 external modem hooked up to my CoCo 3. I was 11 years old and remember noticing a sign at our local public library advertising a modem dial-up number. I wrote the phone number down, and when I got home, I just had to try it right away. Up until this point, I didn't have any BBS phone numbers to try dialing into. I even remember the terminal software package I used. It was called VIP Terminal. I had borrowed it from the color computer users group I belonged to. So I loaded up VIP Terminal and dialed into the public library, and before I knew it, I was online. For the first time ever, I was fascinated watching the text print on the screen at a glorious speed of 300 baud. I couldn't believe all the information available to me right at my fingertips. I could look up books, read descriptions, check to see if the book was available or signed out. It was just all so magical. My dad could not believe I was able to do this. Before long, my family was always getting me to look up books before they would actually make a trip down to the public library. Well, now that I was online connecting to the library, I was thirsty for more. At our next users group meeting, I inquired if anyone had a BBS listing for the local boards to connect to in our area. As my luck would have it, someone had a current list of boards to try. The city I was living in at the time was huge and had other large surrounding cities nearby that was all local phone calls away, so I had tons of BBSs to choose from. In no time at all, I had a small list of my favorite BBSs I would frequently call. I did find a few of the boards I'd try to call would not accept 300 baud. I guess by 1989 standards, 300 baud was too slow. I used this exact setup for a few years, but did try a few other terminal programs along the way. Then sometime in 1991, I got my first 386 PC. I insisted on getting a modem for it right away, so I purchased an internal ISA 2400 baud modem. The first terminal software I used on the PC was called Telex. I set up the COM and IRQ port jumpers on the card and matched the settings accordingly in the Telex terminal software. Now I was all set to dial into BBSs I was using before with my CoCo. I called one of my favorite boards, and this time I noticed a different connection sound coming from my modem speaker. I was then greeted with a connected at 2400 baud message, and within seconds I was blown away. What did I see different on my favorite BBS? Full color text graphics. Wow, I was blown away. The same BBS I've been calling for over a year now looks totally different. I was getting color text graphics, which I soon learned was called ANSI. This was so exciting for me. It was like re-experiencing these boards all over again. This was something I was not able to see on my current CoCo setup. As time went on, I continued enjoying my 2400 baud modem, calling boards in full ANSI glory, playing online door games, downloading files, reading messages, and in the process I was tying up our family phone line and annoying the heck out of my teenage sister who wanted to use the phone to call and talk to her friends. I was obsessed. I found myself spending more time on the modem than doing much of anything else with my computer. I was captivated from all the information different BBSs had to offer. The support message threads were amazing. I learned so much from them. However, after a while, I found myself thirsty. I had a scratch to itch. I wanted to now run my own BBS. I wondered how hard could it actually be? Is this something I could do? I knew for starters I'd need a dedicated phone line, because having people call at all hours of the day on our family phone line would get me in mega trouble. I also knew I didn't want to use my own PC to run it, because then it would be tied up and I couldn't do anything else on it while the BBS was running. Well, again, luck was on my side. As I mentioned earlier, the city I lived in was quite large, and we had computer expos every once in a while. They were like big swap meets with tons of vendors selling used and new computer equipment. I saved up some paper out money and went to one of the shows with my dad. I walked around the various vendor tables looking and asking people for used computer parts and to build up a cheap PC. I was totally clueless at this point. I didn't even know what speed of a PC I'd need to run a BBS. So I inquired, asking people at this event. Everyone kept telling me I don't need much to run a BBS. An old 8088 XT would do the trick. Well, that's just what I ended up piecing together. By the end of the day, I came home with an XT 8088, 640K memory, 20 meg RLL hard drive, Hercules monochrome graphics and monitor. I also managed to get another 2400 baud modem for it as well. So now I'm all set. I got an old XT PC with MS-DOS 5.0 installed on it, and I'm ready to create my own BBS. Only one question though. What BBS software package do I go with? I decided the only logical choice would be to pick my favorite layout from out of all the boards I've been calling. So my choice was Teleguard. I dialed into the BBS I've been calling that uses Teleguard, and I spoke with the sysop. He was nice enough to let me download a current version of Teleguard and also gave me some other pointers to get me started. Before long, I had it installed and somewhat set up on my trusty XT. I also had to learn quickly what a fossil driver was and how to get it installed. Now I'm at the point to ask the dreaded question of my parents. Can we get a second phone line? The answer I got was actually quite shocking. They said, yes, but not now, because we are moving soon. So this put a small roadblock in my plans to get this BBS off the ground. So I put a pause on this project for 3 to 4 months until our house sold and we moved to our new area. The area we moved to was much smaller, and at first I was worried if this would affect the BBS scene and the usage. But I found to my surprise it was actually better. Although not as many BBSs to call in my new area, they were actually better quality versus quantity. And the smaller community was a nice welcoming change. Well, my parents kept to their promise and got me my own dedicated phone line, and I was finally able to put my own BBS up. I advertised it on other local boards in my area, and before no time I had callers. From here on in, I was hooked. I kept upgrading it and learning new things. I figured out how to install door games and other third-party add-ons. I eventually upgraded the PC I was using. The first thing I upgraded on it was I got rid of the monochrome monitor and swapped it for a cheap used EGA monitor and video card. Now I can actually see and edit the color ANSI menu screens on the actual BBS computer and not have to do them on my main PC. I ran my BBS all through my high school years and plus some, the years ranging from 1991 to mid-1997. I also upgraded to Renegade BBS software package from Teleguard because it was based on the same source code and had a lot more extra cool features. In the end, I was up to 4 nodes plus a private 5th node. I was averaging 100 plus callers a day. It was a huge part of my life back then. I met a lot of great people and learned so much. I don't regret one moment of it. But then around early 1997, something called the internet became mainstream to the public, and I started losing callers. I noticed less and less people were using my BBS and opting for the internet. Because of this, I unfortunately had to put the BBS to rest and move on. Okay, enough about that. You're all probably wondering, okay, what does this have to do with the CoCo? I am listening to a CoCo podcast, right? Well, yes, you are correct. From the time I pulled the plug on my BBS, I pretty much forgotten about BBSing and modems altogether. Other than having some occasional fun with a few old Tandy 300 baud modems connecting with Miro. However, this all changed a few months ago, when I discovered and purchased a product called a Y-Modem 232. The Y-Modem 232 is very similar to the Wi-Fi 232 modem, but unfortunately I was unable to obtain one of those. I missed the first 2 runs on them. But lucky for me, I noticed someone else is making the Y-Modem 232 with a color OLED screen to show information where you are connected to and such. For anyone listening that doesn't know what a Wi-Fi 232 or Y-Modem 232 is, well, it's a device that connects wirelessly to your router and has a standard DB25 serial port on it to interface to any computer that has an available serial port. It is essentially a full modem that supports all the standard Haze commands for some extra ones added in the firmware. This allows for connecting to Wi-Fi and other configuration settings such as baud rate speed. As far as the computer is concerned, it is just a plain old-fashioned modem. So basically any old computer can use it, such as your CoCo. And because these wireless modems connect to your router, you now have access to log into a plethora of Telnet BBSs online right now. As of the time of recording this, on the Telnet BBS guide I'm reading, there's 462 BBSs currently online. I'd say that's a pretty good selection. And they look like they're running from all different types of computers. The nice thing is with the Y-Modem 232, or even the Wi-Fi 232 modem, you don't need to use a new computer with a clunky web browser interface. You can use your old favorite retro computer with your choice of terminal software. So now I'm super excited because after all these years, there was something I was finally going to see that I wasn't able to before. I was going to be able to get connected to a BBS in full ANSI color text graphics on my CoCo. I couldn't do this back in the day because there were no terminal packages that supported full color ANSI. But now, thanks to Sockmaster for creating his Twilight terminal software that does support ANSI, I'm finally able to use my CoCo to log on to a bulletin board in ANSI. I ordered the Y-Modem 232 and it was delivered to my surprise within a week. I quickly unboxed it and hooked it up to my Tandy 1000. Booted up Telex terminal software and had it configured and online in no time. I was surfing BBSs and playing my favorite door game called Legend of the Red Dragon, or as it was just called for short, Lord. But quickly after I wanted something more. I wanted to get this thing running on my CoCo 3. I dug out a straight through serial cable and hooked this baby up to my RS-232 pack. I loaded up Twilight Terminal and set the proper configurations to use the RS-232 pack and not the Bitbanger port. I then set up the correct baud rate speed matching what I had set in the Y-Modem 232. But unfortunately, it didn't work. Absolutely nothing came on the screen. I couldn't talk to the modem or see what it was doing. I tried different cables. I even tried a null modem cable, but still nothing. A few days goes by and I'm still baffled. So what did I do next? I contacted a friend, a real CoCo serial communications guru. I contacted Mike Rowan, or Myro, as he is known by on here. He said, send me the Y-Modem 232 and I'll analyze it for you. I shipped it off to him right away, and before I knew it, he had sent me an email with the problem and solution. He said the problem is the Y-Modem 232 doesn't generate all the signals the RS-232 pack looks for. The solution is to make a custom cable and jumper pins 4, 5, and 8 together on the CoCo side, and pins 2, 3, and 7 are connected straight through from the RS-232 pack and the Y-Modem 232. So to make the Y-Modem 232 work, all you only really need is 3 wires between it and the computer. Well, after getting this email from Mike, I went ahead and made my own cable up doing exactly this. I hooked it back up to my RS-232 pack and booted up Twilight Terminal, and voila! It worked and I was online in no time. It was so cool to see ANSI color text graphics after all these years displaying on my CoCo 3. The only slight issue I'm facing right now is Twilight Terminal's losing and dropping characters every so often. Mike and I are going to work on this next challenge. But nonetheless, this is still so awesome. It also works perfectly in VTerm under VT100 settings. You get the extended graphics, just no color. Well, I hope you enjoyed my segment this month and that it wasn't too long-winded or boring. I wanted to help spread the information on making a proper cable up in case any of you are purchasing a Y-Modem 232 and want to use it with your CoCo. I'll ask John to get the link for the Y-Modem 232 webpage in the show notes in case any of you are interested in buying one, or would just like to even read up on it. You can have fun connecting to BBSs and reliving the past, or better yet, maybe some of you want to run your very own CoCo BBS. Well, that's it for now. Until next month, happy CoCo modeming. Well, we've reached the end of episode 33. 2 more episodes until CoCo Fest. Woohoo! As usual, I'd like to thank our host, John Linville, for providing that awesome tech segment on the Infocom zip source code and the news articles each month. Another thanks goes out to Boise for being a full-time part of this podcast now. Oh, and by the way, I like the name of your segment. Big thanks goes out to Mike Rowan for making all those cool commercials you hear each month and doing the editing now. We also like to thank Joel Avey for giving us some of your time to record an interview with you. Last but not least, a huge thanks goes out to all of you who listen and support our show each month. Thank you for listening and your feedback. Stay tuned for next month's show, and until then, happy CoCoing and retro forever.
It's a blast from the past.
Please listen carefully.
CoCo. 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 CoCo.
Dance like there's no tomorrow.
What is this crazy rock and roll music anyway?
It's a blast from the past.